A little beggar girl screams at the millionaire in McDonald's, "My mummy is hungry!" He decides to pay for their food, but he almost faints when another mysterious person opens the door. Watch until the end. The bustling McDonald's on Fifth Avenue was filled with the usual lunchtime crowd when a small voice pierced through the ambient noise, clear and desperate. "My mommy is hungry." The restaurant fell silent for a moment as heads turned toward the source of the cry. A little girl, no more than 6 years old, stood in the middle of the crowded space, her worn-out dress hanging loosely on her thin frame. Her dark curls were tangled, and her eyes held a mixture of desperation and determination that seemed out of place on such a young face. Sarah Mitchell, watching from the bathroom doorway, felt her heart stop. She had only taken her eyes off Emma for a second while washing her hands, and now her daughter had done exactly what she'd been trying to avoid, drawing attention to their situation. The familiar panic began to rise in her chest as she noticed the security guard taking deliberate steps toward her daughter. Without thinking, Sarah rushed forward, her worn sneakers squeaking against the polished floor. She reached Emma just as the guard was about to speak, scooping her daughter's small hand into her own. "I'm so sorry," she mumbled, not meeting anyone's eyes as she hurried them both toward the bathroom, the only safe haven she could think of. Once inside a stall, Sarah pulled Emma close, trying to steady her breathing. The familiar scent of her daughter's hair, a mix of sunshine and the lavender shampoo samples they'd gotten from the shelter, helped ground her. "Baby, we talked about this," she whispered, keeping her voice gentle despite the fear coursing through her veins. "But Mommy, you haven't eaten since yesterday," Emma protested, her bottom lip quivering. "Miss Jenny at the shelter says growing mommies need food too." Sarah closed her eyes, fighting back tears. The shelter had been their home for the past 2 weeks, but yesterday they'd had to leave when their allowed time ran out. She'd spent their last few dollars on a Happy Meal for Emma the day before, pretending she wasn't hungry herself. Now, after walking all night and morning, trying to find somewhere safe to rest, both their stomachs were growling in protest. A knock on the bathroom door made Sarah jump. "Hello? Is everything all right in there?" The voice was female, probably one of the employees. Sarah pressed a finger to her lips, signaling Emma to stay quiet. They'd learned this drill over the past months: stay silent, wait it out, become invisible. But while Sarah was focused on the immediate threat of the employee outside, she hadn't noticed the man who had witnessed everything from his corner booth. James Anderson had been in the middle of a business lunch when the little girl's cry had cut through his carefully constructed world of corporate deals and profit margins. Something about the raw honesty in that child's voice had pierced through his usual detachment. He observed as other customers quickly returned to their meals, the moment of disruption already forgotten in the rush of their busy lives. But James couldn't shake what he'd seen. The look of sheer terror on the mother's face wasn't the expression of someone trying to run a scam. He'd seen enough desperate people trying to con him over the years to recognize genuine fear. The woman's reaction particularly intrigued him. Most people in her situation would have either tried to play up their misfortune for sympathy or slunk away in shame. Instead, she had focused entirely on protecting her child, showing a fierce dignity even in her desperation. There was something else too, the way she had scanned the restaurant before running to the bathroom, as if looking for someone specific. Not the security guard or the manager, but someone else. James found himself reaching for his wallet, an unusual impulse for a man who had built his fortune on careful calculation rather than emotional decisions. He called over one of the employees, a young woman who had been watching the scene unfold, with concern. "I'd like to order some food," he said quietly, "and have it delivered to the bathroom." He handed her enough money to cover several meals, along with a generous tip. "But don't tell them who it's from." The employee nodded, understanding, flickering across her face. As she walked away, James settled back in his booth, his own meal forgotten. He told himself he was just conducting an experiment, testing whether this woman was truly in need or running some kind of scam. But deep down, he knew there was something more drawing him into this situation, something he hadn't felt in a very long time. Inside the bathroom stall, Sarah was trying to figure out their next move when another knock came, softer this time. "I have some food here for you," a gentle voice called out. "No strings attached. You can take it or leave it, but it's yours if you want it." Sarah froze, her mind racing. In her experience, nothing came without strings attached, but Emma's small whimper of hunger broke through her hesitation. Still holding the stall door firmly closed, she called out, "You can leave it by the door." She waited until she heard the bathroom door close before carefully opening the stall. There on the floor sat a large bag emanating the tempting aroma of fresh food. Sarah quickly pulled it inside their stall, her hands shaking as she opened it to find several hamburgers, fries, and drinks. As she watched Emma take her first eager bite, Sarah felt tears sliding down her cheeks. She didn't know who had sent this food, and that uncertainty terrified her. Was it a trap? Had he somehow found them? But for now at least, her daughter wouldn't go hungry. She took a small bite of a hamburger herself, savoring it, trying to make it last. Outside, James Anderson continued to watch the bathroom door, his usual lunch meeting completely forgotten. He had built his empire on being able to read people, and everything about this situation told him there was more to this story than a simple case of homelessness. The way the woman carried herself, her quick thinking, her protective instincts, she was running from something or someone. For the first time in years, James felt something stir inside him, a desire to do more than simply throw money at a problem and walk away. He hadn't felt this kind of emotional pull since before the tragedy that had left him alone in his massive penthouse, surrounded by wealth but empty of purpose. Sarah and Emma remained in the bathroom for nearly an hour, making the food last as long as possible. Sarah's mind raced with possibilities and fears. She needed to find a way out of this situation, but every door seemed closed. The shelters were full. Her savings were gone and she couldn't risk reaching out to old friends. He might be watching them. When they finally emerged, the restaurant had quieted from its lunch rush. Sarah held Emma's hand tightly as they walked toward the exit, keeping her head down to avoid meeting anyone's eyes. But before they could reach the door, a man in an expensive suit stepped into their path. "Excuse me," he said, his voice quiet but commanding. Sarah immediately tensed, positioning herself slightly in front of Emma. The man noticed this subtle movement, and something in his expression softened. "My name is James Anderson. I'd like to speak with you for a moment." Sarah's first instinct was to run, but she forced herself to remain calm. She'd learned the hard way that drawing attention could be dangerous. "Thank you for the food," she said carefully, assuming this must be their anonymous benefactor. "We appreciate your kindness, but we need to go." "I'm not trying to trap you," James said, maintaining a respectful distance. "I own several businesses in the area, including a small cafe 2 blocks from here. We're looking for help with the morning shift." He reached slowly into his jacket, telegraphing his movements, and withdrew a business card. "If you're interested, come by tomorrow at 6 a.m. Ask for me." Sarah stared at the card, not reaching for it. "Why would you offer a job to someone you don't know anything about?" "Because I know enough," James replied. "I know you're protective of your daughter. I know you're cautious about accepting help, and I know you're not looking for handouts. You're looking for a way to support yourself." Emma tugged at Sarah's hand. "Mommy, he seems nice, like Mr. Rogers." Despite her anxiety, Sarah couldn't help but smile slightly at her daughter's comment. She studied James more carefully. His suit probably cost more than she used to make in a month, but there was something in his eyes that didn't match his polished exterior. A hint of sadness, perhaps, or understanding. "The cafe opens at 6 a.m., James continued. "It pays $15 an hour plus tips. There's a small break room upstairs where Emma could stay safely while you work." He placed the card on a nearby table and stepped back. "The choice is yours. No pressure, no strings attached." Sarah hesitated for a moment longer before quickly grabbing the card and slipping it into her pocket. She didn't commit to anything, simply nodding once before guiding Emma toward the door. As they stepped out into the afternoon sun, Sarah's mind was already analyzing every aspect of the interaction, looking for hidden dangers or traps. James watched them leave, noting how the woman constantly scanned their surroundings, checking reflections in windows and looking over her shoulder. Her behavior confirmed his suspicions. She wasn't just homeless, she was hiding from someone. The question was, who and why? Back in his office later that afternoon, James found himself unable to focus on work. The image of the woman and her daughter kept intruding on his thoughts. He pulled up his computer and began doing what he did best, gathering information. He had resources at his disposal that most people couldn't imagine, but he would use them carefully. Something told him that this woman valued her privacy for good reason. Meanwhile, Sarah and Emma spent the afternoon in the public library, their usual safe haven. While Emma colored at a small table, Sarah used one of the public computers to research James Anderson. What she found both reassured and intimidated her. He was indeed a successful businessman, owner of numerous properties and businesses throughout the city. The cafe he'd mentioned, the Morning Brew, was just one small part of his empire. But it was a photo from 3 years ago that caught her attention. James at some charity event standing beside a woman and young girl. The caption mentioned his wife and daughter, but Sarah noticed that in more recent photos he was always alone. There was a story there, but she didn't let herself dwell on it. She had enough of her own problems without getting entangled in someone else's. As night fell, Sarah led Emma to the church shelter they'd found yesterday. It wasn't ideal. They could only stay for 3 nights, and they had to leave early each morning, but it was safer than the streets. As they settled onto their narrow cot, Emma clutched her worn stuffed rabbit close. "Are we going to see the nice man tomorrow, Mummy?" she whispered. Sarah stroked her daughter's hair, buying time before answering. Every instinct told her to run to get as far away from this city as possible. But they had been running for months, and they were running out of options. The business card felt heavy in her pocket, representing both opportunity and risk. "Maybe, baby," she finally answered. "We'll see." As Emma drifted off to sleep, Sarah lay awake, her mind churning. She'd learned the hard way that when something seemed too good to be true, it usually was. But she'd also learned that sometimes, when you're at your lowest point, help can come from unexpected places. The question was, which was this? In his penthouse across town, James Anderson stood at his floor-to-ceiling windows, looking out over the city lights. On his desk lay a preliminary report from his security team. No matches yet for the woman's identity, but they were searching carefully, discreetly. He told himself he was just being cautious, doing his due diligence before potentially hiring someone, but deep down he knew there was more to it. The way she had protected her daughter reminded him painfully of Claire, his late wife, and how fiercely she had loved their own daughter, Lily. For 3 years, he had shut himself off from any emotional attachments, focusing solely on expanding his business empire. But something about this woman and her daughter had cracked that carefully constructed wall. At exactly 5:45 a.m., Sarah stood across the street from the Morning Brew, her hand clasped tightly around Emma's. The cafe was a charming 2-story building with large windows and a fresh coat of deep blue paint. Through the glass, she could see employees preparing for the day, arranging pastries and checking coffee machines. Sarah had barely slept, spending most of the night weighing her options. The shelter would only house them for 2 more nights, and her remaining cash wouldn't even buy them breakfast. Still, she hesitated. Taking this job meant staying in one place, becoming visible, traceable. "The rabbit likes this place, Mommy," Emma said softly, clutching her stuffed companion. "He says it smells like cookies." Sarah smiled despite her anxiety. Emma had always had a way of simplifying difficult decisions. She checked her reflection in a nearby window. She'd done her best to look presentable, washing their clothes in the shelter's laundry room and braiding her hair neatly. But there was no hiding the exhaustion in her eyes or the way her clothes hung loose on her frame. At 5:55 a.m., they crossed the street. Sarah's heart pounded as she pushed open the door, setting off a small bell. A young woman behind the counter looked up and smiled. "You must be Sarah. Mr. Anderson said you might come." She introduced herself as Lucy, the morning shift supervisor. Before Sarah could respond, James Anderson emerged from the back office. He looked different in casual slacks and a light blue button-down shirt, more approachable than the previous day's power suit. "You came," he said, and Sarah detected what seemed like genuine pleasure in his voice. "I haven't decided anything yet," Sarah replied quickly. "I need to know more about the position and about the arrangements for Emma." James nodded, as if he'd expected this response. "Of course. Lucy, could you show Emma the break room upstairs? There's a television and some books up there." He glanced at Sarah for permission. Sarah knelt beside Emma. "Would you like to go look? I'll be right down here." After Emma nodded, Sarah watched carefully as Lucy led her daughter upstairs, noting every detail of their route and studying the staircase's location. Once Emma was settled, James led Sarah to a small table in the corner. "The position is straightforward: taking orders, serving customers, basic food prep. Lucy will handle your training." He paused, studying her face. "The break room upstairs has a security camera feed of the cafe, so you can keep an eye on everything while Emma's up there. The door has a keypad lock, and only staff know the code." Sarah's eyes narrowed slightly. "You seem to have thought this through very carefully." "I like to be thorough," James replied evenly. "The cafe opens at 7 a.m. and closes at 3 p.m. Morning shift is 6 a.m. to 2 p.m. with an hour break. Pay is weekly, in cash if you prefer. We can work out scheduling around Emma's school." "She's homeschooled," Sarah interrupted quickly, then bit her lip, wishing she hadn't revealed even that small detail. James nodded, not pressing for more information. "The break room has good Wi-Fi. She could do her lessons there." He hesitated, then added, "I know you're worried about more than just the job details. You're concerned about why I'm doing this, what I want in return." Sarah met his gaze steadily. "Yes, I am. 3 years ago, I lost my wife and daughter in an accident," James said quietly. "Since then, I've thrown myself into business, expanding my empire, making more money I don't need. Yesterday, when your daughter spoke up in that restaurant, it was the first time in years something broke through that wall I'd built." He smiled slightly. "Besides, I need help here at the cafe. It's a legitimate job offer, nothing more." Sarah absorbed this information, her trained instincts searching for signs of deception. But James's pain seemed genuine, and his explanation made sense. Still, she couldn't afford to let her guard down. "I appreciate your honesty, but you should know I might not be able to stay long, and I can't provide references or—" "I don't need them," James interrupted gently. "I trust my instincts in business, and they're telling me to give you a chance. The question is, are you willing to take it?" Before Sarah could answer, Emma's laughter drifted down from upstairs. Sarah closed her eyes for a moment, remembering her daughter's joy when they'd had their own apartment, her own room, her own toys. They'd been on the run for so long, living in shelters and cheap motels, always looking over their shoulders. "Yes," Sarah said finally, "I'll take the job, but I have conditions. I need to be paid in cash, and I won't give you my last name or social security number. If that's a problem—" "It's not," James assured her, "and we can work something out." He didn't mention that his security team was already trying to discover her identity, not out of malice, but out of a growing need to understand what or who she was running from. Lucy returned with Emma, who was clutching a chocolate chip cookie and grinning. "Mommy, they have a whole box of books upstairs, and Miss Lucy says I can read any of them." Sarah felt tears prick at her eyes, quickly blinking them away. It had been months since she'd seen Emma this excited about anything. "That's wonderful, baby. How would you feel about spending more time here while Mommy works?" Emma's eyes lit up. "Really? We can stay?" James watched the interaction, something tightening in his chest. He recognized the look in Sarah's eyes, the fierce love of a parent willing to do anything to protect their child. It was the same look he'd seen in Claire's eyes countless times before she was taken from him. "Lucy will help you get started," James said, standing. "I have meetings this morning, but I'll check in later." He headed toward the door, then paused. "Sarah, welcome to the morning brew." As Sarah began her training, she felt a mix of hope and anxiety. This could be a new beginning, a chance to build some stability for Emma, or it could be the mistake that finally led him to them. Only time would tell which it would be. The first week at the morning brew passed in a blur of coffee orders, pastry arrangements, and customer interactions. Sarah threw herself into learning every aspect of the job, memorizing regular customers, orders, and mastering the espresso machine. Her quick mind and attention to detail impressed Lucy, who commented that she seemed overqualified for cafe work. Emma flourished in the break room, creating a small workspace where she did her lessons and read through the cafe's collection of books. Sarah checked the security feed constantly at first, but gradually began to relax as she saw how content her daughter was. During her breaks, they would share lunch, and Emma would proudly show off what she'd learned that day. James kept his distance, stopping by the cafe only occasionally to check on operations, but Sarah often felt his eyes on her when he thought she wasn't looking. She recognized the curiosity in his gaze. He was trying to figure her out, to understand her story. It made her nervous, but so far he had kept his word about not pressing for information. On Friday afternoon, as Sarah was finishing her shift, Lucy handed her an envelope containing her first week's pay in cash. "Mr. Anderson also asked me to give you this," she said, passing over a small paper bag. Inside, Sarah found a gift card to a nearby department store and a note, "For whatever you and Emma might need, no strings attached." The gift card was for $500. Sarah's first instinct was to return it, but she thought of Emma's worn-out shoes and the approaching autumn weather. Pride was a luxury she couldn't afford when it came to her daughter's needs. That evening, instead of heading to the shelter, Sarah took Emma shopping. They bought warm clothes, new shoes, and a few small toys. Emma's eyes grew wide when Sarah let her pick out a new backpack with butterflies on it. "Can I really have it, Mommy?" "Yes, baby," Sarah said, fighting back tears as she watched her daughter hug the backpack. Such a simple thing, but it had been so long since she'd been able to give Emma anything new. As they left the store, Sarah's instincts kicked in. Something felt off. She casually guided Emma to a window display, pretending to look at it while actually studying the reflection of the street behind them. There, a man in a dark jacket trying too hard to appear casual as he looked at his phone. Sarah's heart began to race, but she kept her movements calm and deliberate. "Emma, remember our game? The one where we pretend we're secret agents?" Emma nodded, immediately understanding. They'd played this game many times before, always when they needed to disappear quickly. Sarah led them into the crowd of shoppers, then into a department store. They went up the escalator, down another, through the perfume section where the strong scents would mask their trail. Finally, after taking a circuitous route and checking multiple times to ensure they weren't followed, Sarah brought them to a small motel she'd noticed earlier in the week. It was more expensive than the shelter, but the week's pay and what she'd saved from the gift card would cover a few nights. Once they were safely in the room, Emma fell asleep quickly, clutching her new backpack. Sarah sat by the window, peeking through the curtains periodically. Had she been paranoid? Was the man just another shopper, or had he finally found them? Her phone buzzed, a cheap prepaid model she'd bought with her first day's pay, a text from an unknown number. "You can't hide forever, Sarah. You know you belong with me." Sarah's hands shook as she deleted the message and removed the phone's battery, fighting the urge to be physically ill. How had he gotten this number? She'd been so careful. Unless, had James run a background check, found information about her past, shared it? No, she told herself. She'd watched James carefully all week. He was curious about her situation, yes, but his concern seemed genuine. The way he looked at Emma reminded her of how he'd described his lost daughter. There was pain there and longing, but no malice. Still, she couldn't take chances. She should leave now, find another city, start over again. But as she looked at Emma sleeping peacefully, surrounded by their shopping bags, Sarah felt a wave of exhaustion. How long could they keep running? Emma needed stability, education, friends. She needed a normal life. Sarah moved to the bed and gently stroked Emma's hair. "I'm sorry, baby," she whispered. "I'm so sorry for all of this." Emma stirred slightly but didn't wake, clutching her stuffed rabbit closer. As Sarah lay down beside her daughter, her mind raced with possibilities. Maybe the text was just a coincidence, a wrong number that happened to mirror her fears. Maybe the man in the dark jacket was just a shopper. Maybe, just maybe, they could stay here, build a life, find safety. But experience had taught her that maybes were dangerous. She needed to be smart, to plan carefully. Tomorrow she would start taking precautions, mapping out escape routes from the cafe, establishing emergency meeting points with Emma, finding safe houses they could run to if needed. She wouldn't let her guard down again, wouldn't let herself be lulled into a false sense of security, because she knew better than anyone that security was an illusion, and the moment you started to feel safe was usually when everything fell apart. The morning brew hummed with its usual Monday morning energy as Sarah expertly navigated between customers, her movements efficient and precise. 2 weeks into the job, she had already memorized the regulars' orders and learned to anticipate the rush hours. But beneath her calm exterior, her nerves were frayed from nights of fitful sleep and constant vigilance. The weekend in the motel had stretched their resources, forcing Sarah to dip into the emergency cash she'd been saving. They'd moved to a different shelter across town, adding an hour to their morning commute, but providing the anonymity Sarah desperately needed. Each morning, they took a different route to the cafe, doubling back and changing buses to ensure they weren't followed. "Sarah?" Lucy's voice broke through her thoughts. "Mr. Anderson would like to see you in his office when you have a moment." Sarah's stomach tightened. James hadn't been to the cafe in days, and an official summons to his office sent warning. Bells ringing through her mind. She glanced at the security feed showing Emma absorbed in her lessons upstairs, then nodded. "I'll go now," during the slow period. James's office was smaller than she'd expected, warm and inviting with walls lined with books. He sat behind a modest desk, his usual polished appearance slightly rumpled, as if he'd been running his hands through his hair in frustration. "Please sit down," he said, gesturing to a chair. "How are you settling in?" "Fine," Sarah replied, cautiously perching on the edge of the seat. "Is there a problem with my work?" "Not at all, you're one of our best employees." James leaned forward, his expression concerned. "But I noticed you seemed tense today. And Lucy mentioned you appeared nervous last Friday, like something had frightened you." Sarah's defenses immediately went up. They'd been watching her that closely. "I'm fine," she repeated firmly. "Is that all?" "Sarah," James hesitated, then pulled a folder from his desk drawer. "I need to be honest with you. After what happened last week, I had my security team do some checking. They found something concerning." Sarah's heart stopped. This was it, the moment everything fell apart. Her eyes darted to the door, calculating how quickly she could get upstairs to Emma. "There was a man following you Friday evening," James continued, opening the folder to reveal surveillance photos. "My team spotted him watching the cafe earlier that day, then tailing you to the department store. They intervened before he could follow you to wherever you went next." Sarah stared at the photos, her hands trembling slightly. The man in the dark jacket, she hadn't been paranoid after all. "Your team, they've been watching me?" "Watching over you," James corrected gently. "After I saw how scared you were that first day in McDonald's, I knew you were running from something serious. I couldn't offer you a job, bring you into my business without making sure you had protection." "I don't need your protection," Sarah snapped, standing up. "And I don't appreciate being spied on." "The man works for Carson Industries," James continued, his voice still calm. "It's a large corporation based in Seattle, owned by Robert Carson. Does that name mean anything to you?" Sarah's face went pale, but she quickly composed herself. "No," she lied. "I need to get back to work." "Sarah, wait." James stood up, keeping the desk between them, as if to make her feel safer. "I'm not trying to intrude in your life, but if you and Emma are in danger, I want to help. I have resources, connection. You have no idea what you're getting involved in." Sarah interrupted, her voice shaking. "Please, just stay out of it. For your own safety." "Like I stayed out of it at McDonald's?" James challenged. "I tried that for 3 years after I lost my family, staying out of everything, avoiding connections, building walls. It doesn't work. Whatever you're running from, you don't have to face it alone." Sarah's hand was on the doorknob when James spoke again, softer this time. "The text message you received Friday night, my team traced it. It came from a burner phone, but it was purchased in Seattle." Sarah whirled around. You monitored my phone. No, James assured her quickly, but when you deleted the battery right after receiving a text, it wasn't hard to figure out something was wrong. Sarah, this man, Robert Carson, is he your ex-husband? The question hung in the air between them. Sarah's mind raced with possibilities. Deny everything, grab Emma and run, or finally tell someone the truth. Before she could decide, Lucy burst into the office without knocking. Mr. Anderson, Sarah, you need to see this. They followed Lucy to the front of the cafe where she pointed to her phone. On the screen was a local news website's homepage. The headline made Sarah's blood run cold. Tech billionaire Robert Carson offers $100,000 reward for information about missing wife and daughter. Beneath the headline was a photo, Sarah and Emma from 2 years ago at a charity gala. Sarah looked different then, expensively dressed, hair professionally styled, standing beside a handsome man with a charming smile that never quite reached his eyes. "Is that you?" Lucy whispered, looking between Sarah and the photo. Sarah didn't answer. She was already running toward the stairs, taking them 2 at a time, her only thought reaching Emma before anyone else could. Behind her, she heard James barking orders. "Lucy, close the cafe. Tell everyone we have an emergency plumbing issue. Now." But Sarah barely registered his words. Her whole world had narrowed to a single purpose, protecting her daughter. Because if Robert was making such a public move, it meant only one thing. He was done playing cat and mouse. The real hunt was about to begin. Emma looked up from her books as Sarah burst into the break room, immediately sensing her mother's distress. "Mommy, what's wrong?" "Pack your things, baby, we need to go." Sarah's voice was steady despite her racing heart. They'd practiced this. Everything important stayed in their backpacks, ready to grab and run at a moment's notice. James appeared in the doorway as Emma was zipping up her butterfly backpack. "Sarah, wait, please, let me help you." "You can't." "Help us," Sarah said, checking the window for possible escape routes. "No one can, you don't know what he's capable of." "Then tell me," James urged, "because right now all I see is a woman accused of kidnapping her own daughter, with a $100,000 reward on her head. The police will be looking for you now. You need someone on your side." Sarah froze. She hadn't thought about how the story would look to others. A wealthy businessman searching for his missing family, offering a generous reward to bring them home. Robert had always been skilled at manipulating public perception. "He's not who people think he is," Sarah said finally, her voice barely above a whisper. "The charming tech innovator, the philanthropist, it's all a facade." Emma clutched her stuffed rabbit tighter. "Is Daddy looking for us again?" The fear in her daughter's voice broke something in Sarah. She knelt beside Emma, brushing a strand of hair from her face. "Yes, baby. But I won't. Let him find us, I promise." "I don't want to go back," Emma said, her lower lip trembling. "He hurts you when he's angry, and he says mean things that make you cry." James's expression darkened at Emma's words. "Sarah, my private elevator leads directly to the parking garage. I have a car waiting. Let me take you somewhere safe just until we can figure this out." Sarah hesitated. Every instinct screamed at her to run, to trust no one. But Emma's words echoed in her mind. She'd tried so hard to shield her daughter from the truth, but children saw more than adults realized. Emma had witnessed too much already. "Why?" Sarah asked James. "Why would you risk helping us? Robert Carson is a powerful man. He could destroy your business, your reputation." "Because 3 years ago, I couldn't save my own family," James replied, his voice rough with emotion. "I was too focused on business, on making money. I missed the signs that Claire was struggling, that Lily needed more attention. The night they were driving to that dance recital, I was too busy to attend." He stopped, composing himself. "I can't change the past, but I can choose to do the right thing now." A commotion from downstairs interrupted them, raised voices, demanding to speak to the manager. Lucy appeared at the top of the stairs, looking worried. "Mr. Anderson, there are reporters outside, and 2 men who say they're private investigators hired by Robert Carson." Sarah's face went pale. "He works fast, he always does." "The elevator," James said decisively. "Now." He pressed a key card into Sarah's hand. "This will take you to the garage level. My driver, Marcus, is waiting in a black SUV. He'll take you to a safe house I maintain outside the city. I'll handle things here and join you later. I can't ask you to lie for us, Sarah protested. You didn't ask. I'm choosing to. James's voice was firm. The safe house is off the grid. No paper trail, no digital footprint. Not even my regular security team knows about it. It will give us time to think, to plan. Sarah studied his face, looking for any sign of deception. Instead, she saw only determination and something else, understanding. He knew what it was, like to fail to protect someone you loved. Maybe that's why he was so determined to help them now. Emma, James said gently, in the safe house, there's a room that used to be my daughter's. It has books and toys and a window seat where you can read. Would you like to see it? Emma looked at her mother questioningly. Sarah took a deep breath, then nodded. Okay, but first, you need to know the truth about Robert, about why we ran, because if you're going to risk everything to help us, you deserve to know what you're getting into. Tell me in the car, James said, already guiding them towards the hidden elevator. Right now we need to move. As the elevator doors closed behind them, Sarah heard the commotion growing louder upstairs. She clutched Emma's hand tighter, knowing that once again they were putting their lives in someone else's hands. But this time felt different. This time, they weren't just running away from danger. They were running towards something that felt surprisingly like hope. In the parking garage, Marcus stood beside a black SUV with tinted windows, looking alert but calm. As he helped them into the vehicle, Sarah caught a glimpse of herself in the side mirror. She barely recognized the woman staring back at her, tired, scared, but with a determination in her eyes that hadn't been there before, because this time they weren't alone. And maybe, just maybe, that would make all the difference. The safe house turned out to be a modest lakeside cabin, hidden behind thick trees and accessible only by a winding private road. As Marcus drove them through the security gate, Sarah noticed cameras disguised as birdhouses and motion sensors masked as garden lights. James Anderson hadn't exaggerated about the security measures. Inside, the cabin was warm and inviting, with comfortable furniture and large windows overlooking the lake. Emma immediately gravitated toward the window seat James had mentioned, her eyes wide as she took in the peaceful view. The nearest neighbor is 5 miles away, James explained, helping them settle in. The property is registered to a shell corporation. Even if Robert traces you to the cafe, he won't find any connection to this place. Sarah walked through the rooms, her trained eyes noting exits and potential security weaknesses. The cabin was larger than it appeared from outside, with 3 bedrooms, a modern kitchen, and a basement that had been converted into what looked like a command center, complete with surveillance monitors and communication equipment. You said this wasn't your regular safe house, Sarah observed. Why do you have a place like this? James's expression tightened slightly. After I lost Claire and Lily, I became paranoid. I built this place thinking I could protect them from anything. By the time it was finished, they were gone. He forced a smile. At least now it can help someone else. Emma had discovered the room James had mentioned, a bedroom decorated in soft blues and greens, with built-in bookshelves and a collection of children's books. Mommy, look! There are so many books. That was Lily's room, James said quietly. She loved to read, just like Emma. Sarah touched his arm gently. I'm sorry. About your family. I'm sorry about what you've been through too. James gestured toward the living room. Maybe it's time you told me the whole story. Sarah nodded, knowing she couldn't put it off any longer. They settled on the comfortable couches, while Emma explored her new room, though Sarah made sure to keep her daughter within earshot. I met Robert 7 years ago, Sarah began, her voice steady despite the painful memories. I was working as a software engineer at a startup he was interested in acquiring. He was charming, brilliant, and seemed to value my opinions about technology and innovation. We married 6 months later. She paused, gathering her thoughts. The changes were subtle at first. He wanted to know where I was all the time, who I was talking to. He said it was because he worried about corporate espionage, that as his wife, I needed to be careful about information leaks. It seemed reasonable. At the time. When did you realize it wasn't reasonable? James asked gently. After Emma was born. He became obsessed with control. He installed surveillance cameras throughout our house, monitored all my communications, hired staff who reported my every move to him. If I disagreed with him about anything, he would... Sarah glanced toward Emma's room, lowering her voice. He never left marks where people could see them. He was too smart for that. James's hands clenched into fists, but his voice remained calm. Why didn't you leave sooner? He made sure I knew what would happen if I tried. He had recordings of me taken out of context that made it look like I was unstable, unfit to be a mother. He said if I ever left, he would use them to take Emma away from me. Sarah's voice shook slightly. But then 6 months ago I found something on his private server, files about other women, ex-girlfriends, employees who had threatened to expose him, women who had mysteriously lost everything, been discredited, or simply disappeared. Did you go to the police? Sarah laughed bitterly. Robert owns half the police department in Seattle. The other half he controls through blackmail and bribes. Besides, I had no proof. The files disappeared as soon as I found them, and my access to the server was revoked. He knew I'd seen them, though. The next day he started talking about sending Emma to a private boarding school in Switzerland. That's when I knew we had to run. How did you manage it? I planned for months, secretly gathering cash, creating false identities. I waited until he was at a technology conference in Singapore. We had 24 hours before he realized we were gone. Sarah closed her eyes, remembering. We've been running ever since. Every time I think we're safe, he finds us. He has people everywhere, resources I can't even imagine. James was quiet for a moment, processing everything. The reward offer was clever, he finally said. Now every desperate person in the city will be looking for you, hoping to claim the money. And you'll look like the villain, a mother stealing her child from a loving father. That's Robert's specialty, manipulating perceptions. In public, he's the brilliant innovator making the world a better place. In private, Sarah shuddered. The worst part is knowing that someday Emma will be old enough to find those news stories, to read about how her mother kidnapped her from her loving father. We won't let that happen, James said firmly. I have resources too, connections, that even Robert Carson can't touch. We'll find a way to expose him, to show people who he really is. Sarah shook her head. You don't understand. Robert doesn't just destroy his enemies. He destroys everyone they care about. I can't let you risk everything for us. Sarah. James leaned forward, his eyes intense. 3 years ago, I was powerless to save my family. I'm not powerless anymore. Let me help you. Let me do this one good thing. Before Sarah could respond, Emma came running into the room, clutching a book. Mommy, can we stay here? Just for a little while. Please? Sarah looked at her daughter's hopeful face, then at James's determined one. For so long she'd carried this burden alone, trusting no one, always ready to run. But maybe, just maybe, it was time to take a stand. Yes, baby, she said softly. We can stay. For now. Outside, the sun was setting over the lake, painting the sky in shades of pink and gold. Sarah watched as Emma curled up in the window seat with her book, looking more relaxed than she had in months. For the first time since they'd fled Seattle, she allowed herself to feel something dangerous, hope. The next few days settled into an unexpected rhythm. While James returned to the city to manage the fallout at the cafe, Sarah and Emma explored their temporary sanctuary. The cabin's kitchen was well stocked, and Sarah found herself enjoying the simple pleasure of cooking real meals again, watching Emma's face light up at the smell of fresh-baked cookies. But peace was an illusion they couldn't afford to embrace. Every morning, James sent reports about Robert's escalating search efforts. The reward had been doubled. Private investigators were showing up at shelters and soup kitchens across the city. Local news stations were running the story regularly, painting Robert as a heartbroken father desperate to reunite with his family. We need to be proactive, James announced one evening, spreading documents across the dining room table after Emma had gone to bed. I've been gathering information. Robert's not as careful as he thinks he is. Sarah leaned forward, examining the papers. Financial records, email printouts, surveillance photos. James had been busy. How did you get all this? Let's just say I have friends in interesting places. James pointed to a series of transactions. Look at these payments. Large sums to offshore accounts, all carefully hidden behind shell companies. But there's a pattern. Sarah studied the documents, her tech background helping her spot the connections. These dates, they match up with when those women disappeared, the ones I found in his files. Exactly, and here's something else. James pulled out more papers. One of those women didn't disappear. She's living under a new identity in Australia. My people found her. She's willing to talk. Sarah's heart raced. That's huge, but also dangerous. Robert would do anything to keep her quiet. She knows that. She's still willing to help. James hesitated. There's more. Remember how you said Robert controlled the Seattle police? I did some digging. He doesn't control all of them. There's a detective, Maria Suarez, who's been quietly investigating him for months. She suspects him of multiple crimes, but hasn't been able to prove anything. Why are you telling me this? Because we need to make a decision. James sat back, his expression serious. We can keep hiding, keep running, or we can fight back. Use this information to expose him, to show the world who Robert Carson really is. Sarah stood up, pacing the room. It's too risky. He has too much power, too many resources. And I don't, James challenged. Sarah, my company may not be as large as Carson Industries, but I have influence too. Connections in media, in politics, in law enforcement. We can do this. We can end this. You don't understand what's at stake. Sarah's voice rose before she caught herself glancing toward Emma's room. More quietly, she continued. I've seen what he does to people who threaten him. The women in those files, some of them just vanished. No traces, no bodies, nothing. Their families still don't know what happened to them. James moved closer, his voice gentle but firm. I do understand. That's why we have to stop him. Not just for you and Emma, but for all his victims, past and future. Sarah was about to respond when a notification chimed on one of the security monitors. James quickly moved to check it, his expression darkening. Someone's trying to access the cafe's employee records. They're good. They almost got through. Our firewalls. Robert's people, Sarah said, her face pale. He's getting closer. He won't find anything. All records of your employment were scrubbed the day you left. James studied the attempted breach patterns. But you're right. He's getting desperate, which means he's getting dangerous. As if to emphasize his point, Sarah's burner phone buzzed. She had kept it powered off most of the time, turning it on only briefly each day to check for important messages. The text was from an unknown number. Did you really think Anderson could protect you? No one can protect you from me. You belong to me, Sarah. Always. James read the message over her shoulder, his jaw tightening. He's trying to scare you. Make you feel helpless. It's working, Sarah admitted, her hands shaking as she removed the phone's battery. Sarah, look at me. James turned her gently to face him. You're not helpless. You're one of the strongest people I've ever met. You escaped him once already. You've kept Emma safe for months, all on your own. But you don't have to do this alone anymore. Sarah looked into his eyes, seeing the same determination she'd noticed that first day at McDonald's. But there was something else there too. Something that made her heart beat faster in a way that had nothing to do with fear. What's your plan? She asked finally. Detective Suarez has been building a case. With the evidence we've gathered, plus testimony from the woman in Australia, we might have enough to move against him. But we'd need one more thing. James paused. We'd need you to testify. Sarah's first instinct was to refuse. The thought of facing Robert in court, of reliving those years of abuse and manipulation, made her physically ill. But then she thought of Emma, of the life her daughter deserved. A life free from fear, from running, from looking over their shoulders. If we do this, she said slowly, we have to be certain, 100% certain, because if we move against him and fail... We won't fail, James interrupted. I promise you that. Before Sarah could respond, A sound from upstairs made them both freeze. Footsteps on the roof. James immediately moved to the security monitors while Sarah ran to Emma's room. But as she reached for her daughter's door, all the lights in the cabin went out, plunging them into darkness. Someone had found them. The question was, who? In the sudden darkness, Sarah's training kicked in. She quickly but silently entered Emma's room, finding her daughter already awake and alert. They had practiced this. Emma knew exactly what to do when things went wrong. "Secret agent time?" Emma whispered, already reaching for her pre-packed emergency backpack. "That's right, baby. Just like we practiced." Sarah guided Emma toward the hidden panel in the closet that James had shown them, an emergency escape route leading to a concealed bunker beneath the house. Meanwhile, James activated the backup generator, but only for the security systems keeping the house dark. He moved through the shadows with surprising stealth for a businessman, checking the monitors in the basement command center. The infrared cameras showed 3 figures on the roof and 2 more approaching from the lakeside. "Sarah," he called, softly through the security system's intercom. "5 intruders, professional equipment. They're trying to disable the security system." Sarah's heart raced as she helped Emma into the hidden passage. "Stay here, baby. Don't come out unless you hear our special code word, remember?" Emma nodded bravely, clutching her stuffed rabbit. "I love you, Mommy." "I love you too, sweetheart." Sarah closed the panel and hurried to join James in the command center, her sock-covered feet silent on the stairs. "They're not Robert's usual people," James said as she entered. "Different tactics, more sophisticated equipment. I don't think he trusts his regular team anymore." A crash from upstairs made them both jump. "They're in," Sarah whispered. James pulled out a tablet showing her the layout of the house with glowing dots representing the intruders. "The panic room is secure. They won't find Emma, but we need to get out of here. There's a tunnel from this room leading to a boathouse on the other side of the property." "You really did think of everything," Sarah said, managing a weak smile despite her fear. "I learned from failing to protect my family once. I won't fail again." James began activating security protocols on his tablet. "The house has defensive measures, but they're designed to delay, not stop. We have maybe 5 minutes." Suddenly a voice called out from upstairs, familiar, confident, sending chills down Sarah's spine. "Sarah, I know you're here, darling. Don't make this harder than it needs to be." "Robert," Sarah breathed, her face going pale. "He came himself. He never does that." "You really got under his skin," James said, quickly gathering essential equipment. "He's losing control of the narrative. The press is starting to ask questions about why you ran, whether there's more to the story." "Emma," Sarah whispered, "I need to get her." "She's safer where she is," James interrupted gently. "The panic room has supplies for days and multiple escape routes. Right now we need to draw them away from the house." The sound of footsteps overhead grew closer. James activated something on his tablet, and suddenly alarms blared throughout the house. Smoke began pouring from vents in the ceiling. Not real smoke, but a sophisticated cover designed to confuse and disorient. "Now," James said, grabbing Sarah's hand. While they're distracted, they slipped into the tunnel just as the first intruder reached the basement stairs. Sarah's heart ached at leaving Emma behind, but she knew James was right. The panic room was the safest place for her. They had drilled this, prepared for it. Emma knew what to do. The tunnel was narrow, but well lit with emergency strips along the floor. They moved quickly, hearing muffled shouts and chaos from the house behind them. Sarah's mind raced. Robert had never personally participated in the hunt before. He always worked through intermediaries, maintaining his public image of the concerned father. For him to show up himself meant something had changed. "He's desperate," she said as they ran. "The evidence you've gathered, the witness in Australia, he knows we could actually hurt him this time." "Good," James replied grimly. "The more desperate he gets, the more likely he is to make mistakes." They reached the boathouse, but instead of emerging, James led them to another hidden door. "Secondary tunnel," he explained. "The boathouse is too obvious." This passage was rougher, clearly newer than the first, leading into the dense woods behind the property. As they emerged into the cool night air, Sarah heard Robert's voice again, carried on the wind from the house's external speakers. "You can't hide forever, Sarah. Everything you love, everything you've built here, I'll take it all away, just like before." Sarah stumbled, the old fear threatening to overwhelm her. James caught her arm, steadying her. "He's wrong," James said, firmly. "You're not alone this time." An explosion rocked the ground, one of the security system's diversionary tactics going off near the lake. In the distance, they could hear sirens approaching, James's backup plans in action. "Local police," he explained as they moved deeper into the woods. "They're not all on Robert's payroll. Detective Suarez has some trusted officers watching the property. They'll keep Robert busy while we get to safety." "And Emma?" "Marcus will extract her through one of the other escape routes once things calm down. She has the emergency phone we gave her. She'll contact us at the rendezvous point." Sarah wanted to argue, wanted to run back to her daughter, but years of survival instincts kept her moving forward. Emma was smart and brave, and they had practiced this scenario repeatedly. Right now, the best thing she could do was draw Robert's attention away from the house. As they reached James's emergency vehicle, hidden under camouflage in the woods, Sarah looked back at the chaos they'd left behind. Emergency lights strobed through the trees, and she could hear Robert shouting orders to his men. For the first time, she heard something in his voice she'd never heard before: fear. "He's not invincible," James said, reading her thoughts as they got into the vehicle. "And now he knows it too." Sarah buckled her seatbelt as James started the engine. "Where are we going?" "Somewhere he'll never think to look," James replied, pulling out onto a hidden access road. "It's time to stop running and start fighting back." Behind them, Robert Carson stood on the deck of the lake house, watching the woods where they'd disappeared. His handsome face was twisted with rage as he realized that once again Sarah had slipped through his fingers. But this time was different. This time, she had help, powerful help. For the first time in his life, Robert Carson wasn't in complete control, and that made him more dangerous than ever. The safe house in the city looked like any other upscale apartment building, its luxury providing anonymity among the wealthy, residents who valued their privacy. Detective Maria Suarez buzzed them in through a private entrance, her sharp eyes taking in every detail of their appearance as they entered her unit. "You look better than I expected, considering what went down at the lake," she said, leading them into a secure room filled with surveillance equipment. "Robert Carson's having a very bad night." The local police found some interesting items his team left behind when they had to run. Military-grade equipment that's definitely not legal for civilian use. "Emma?" Sarah asked immediately. "Safe," Suarez confirmed. "Marcus extracted her through the northwest tunnel 40 minutes ago. She's with my partner at another secure location. Smart kid, followed the protocols perfectly." Sarah sagged with relief, and James steadied her with a gentle hand on her shoulder. The detective noticed the gesture but didn't comment. "Carson's getting sloppy," Suarez continued, pulling up surveillance footage on her monitors. "Showing up in person, using illegal equipment, violating multiple jurisdictions. He's given us more evidence tonight than in months of investigation." "He's always been careful before," Sarah said, studying the footage. "Maintaining his public image, working through proxies. I've never seen him like this." "Because he's never been truly threatened before," James observed. "The witness in Australia, the financial records we've uncovered, Sarah's potential testimony. It's all coming together too fast for him to control the narrative." Suarez nodded. "My task force has been building a case against him for 18 months. Money laundering, corporate espionage, blackmail. We knew he was dirty, but could never prove it. Then you two started stirring things up, and suddenly, everyone he's ever hurt is coming forward." She pulled up more files on her screen. Dozens of women, all with similar stories. Harassment, manipulation, abuse of power. Some had worked for Carson Industries, others had personal relationships with Robert. All had been systematically destroyed when they tried to speak out. "Most won't testify publicly," Suarez admitted. "They're still too afraid, but they're providing evidence, corroborating each other's stories. The pattern is undeniable." "It won't be enough," Sarah said quietly. "Robert has too many connections, too much influence. He'll find a way to discredit everything." "Not this time." James pulled out his phone, showing them a news alert that had just come through. The headline made Sarah gasp. Carson Industries. Board calls emergency meeting amid mounting scandals. The board, Sarah breathed. They're finally standing up to him. They don't have a choice, Suarez explained. Carson's obsession with finding you has led him to make mistakes. The illegal operation tonight, the escalating reward offers, the aggressive private investigators. It's all drawing the wrong kind of attention. Shareholders are getting nervous, and nervous shareholders are something even Robert can't control, James added. His power comes from the company. If he loses that, he becomes vulnerable, Sarah finished, but also more dangerous than ever. As if to prove her point, all their phones buzzed simultaneously, a breaking news alert. Robert Carson was holding an emergency press conference. They watched in tense silence as he appeared on screen, looking appropriately disheveled and emotional. My daughter is out there, scared and alone, he said, his voice breaking perfectly. My wife is being manipulated by people who want to destroy our family for their own gain. To those who are hiding them, you will be found. You will be punished. No one takes what's mine. Sarah shuddered at the familiar possessive tone, the barely concealed threat beneath the concerned father act. But something else caught her attention. He's wearing his blue tie, she said suddenly. What? Suarez asked. The tie, it's his tell. He always wears that specific blue tie when he's about to do something drastic. Sarah's hands began to shake. The last time I saw him wear it was the day he told me he was sending Emma to Switzerland. He must have another plan, something we haven't anticipated. James and Suarez exchanged worried looks. We need to move you again, the detective said. If he's planning something big... No, Sarah interrupted firmly. No more running. Every time we run, he gets stronger. He feeds off the fear, uses it to manipulate people's perceptions. It's time to change the game. What are you suggesting? James asked. Sarah took a deep breath. I want to make a statement of my own. Tell my story publicly before he can spin it any further. Not as a victim, but as a survivor who's ready to fight back. It's risky, Suarez warned. Once you go public, there's no going back. And it might provoke him into doing something, so even more desperate. I know, but Emma deserves a life without fear. All those other women Robert hurt, they deserve justice. We can't get that by hiding. James studied her face, seeing the determination that had first drawn him to her cause. You're sure about this? No, Sarah admitted with a slight smile, but I'm sure about one thing. I'm tired of letting him control the narrative. It's time for the world to hear the truth. Suarez nodded slowly. I have contacts at several major news outlets, people who can't be bought or intimidated. If we do this, we do it right. Full protection, controlled environment, maximum impact. We'll need to move fast, James added, before Robert can implement whatever he's planning, and we'll need to keep Emma completely secure. Emma stays with my partner in the FBI safe house, Suarez said firmly. No contact, no communication that could be traced. At least until this plays out. Sarah's heart ached at the thought of more separation from her daughter, but she knew it was necessary. How soon can we do this? Give me 12 hours to set everything up, Suarez replied. Make it a morning show exclusive. Maximum viewers catching Robert off guard while he's still reeling from tonight's failures. As they began planning the details, Sarah felt something she hadn't experienced in years, a sense of taking control back from Robert. She thought of Emma, safe and brave in her hiding place, following their practiced protocols perfectly. She thought of all the other women Robert had hurt, silenced, destroyed. She thought of James risking everything to help them. One more thing, she said suddenly. When we do this interview, I want to do it from your cafe, James, the place where I first started to believe in hope again. James smiled, understanding. The symbolism. The morning brew it is, full circle. Outside, the city was beginning to wake up, the first hints of dawn touching the horizon. Sarah watched the growing light, knowing that by this time tomorrow everything would be different. For better or worse, the game was about to change. The morning brew looked different in the pre-dawn hours, its windows dark and tables empty. Sarah stood in the middle of the cafe, remembering her first day here, how it had felt like both a sanctuary and a trap. Now it would become something else. A battleground. The news crew will set up here, Detective Suarez explained, gesturing to the area near the window seat where Emma used to read. We've vetted everyone involved in the production, no connections to Carson or his associates. The interview goes live at 7 a.m. Lucy, who had insisted on being present, was arranging fresh flowers on the counter. It should look normal, she said, like any other morning. That's what the Morning Brew has always been about, a place where people feel safe. Sarah touched one of the flowers gently. Thank you, Lucy, for everything. The cafe's perimeter is secure, James announced, returning from an outside check with his security team. We've got plainclothes officers on every corner and surveillance on all approach routes. If Robert tries anything, he will, Sarah said quietly. He won't be able to help himself. The question is how. As if on cue, Sarah's new secure phone, provided by Suarez's team, buzzed with a message. It was from a journalist at the Seattle Times. Mr. Carson's legal team has announced they're filing emergency custody papers this morning, citing maternal kidnapping and psychological instability. Would you care to comment? Right on schedule, Suarez muttered, reading over Sarah's shoulder. He's trying to preempt your interview with legal action, make you look unstable before you can tell your story. It won't work, James said firmly. We've got our own legal team ready to respond, and once Sarah tells her story, the world will see him for what he really is, Lucy finished, her voice hard. She had become fiercely protective of Sarah and Emma over their time at the cafe. The news crew arrived at 6, setting up their equipment with practiced efficiency. The interviewer, Diana Chen, had built her reputation on exposing corporate corruption. She sat with Sarah for a few minutes before they began, reviewing the outline of their discussion. We'll start with the basics, Diana explained. Let you tell your story in your own words. Then we'll bring in the evidence, the financial records, the testimonies from other women, the pattern of abuse and control. But most importantly, we'll show that this isn't just about you and Emma anymore. This is about every woman Robert Carson has ever hurt. Sarah nodded, her hands clasped tightly in her lap. I hope Emma understands why I'm doing this, why we can't be together right now. She knows, James said softly, sitting beside her. She's smart, like her mother, and she wants you to be brave. Sarah smiled slightly, remembering Emma's words from their last phone call. Go get the bad guy, Mommy, like in the stories. At 6:45, Diana's producer announced they would be going live in 15 minutes. Sarah went to the bathroom to check her appearance one last time. The woman in the mirror looked different from the one who had hidden in a McDonald's bathroom just weeks ago. She was still afraid, but the fear no longer controlled her. You look beautiful, Lucy said from the doorway. Strong. I don't feel strong, Sarah admitted. That's what makes you strong. James's voice came from behind Lucy. You're doing this despite the fear. Sarah emerged from the bathroom to find the cafe transformed by the lights and cameras. Diana was in position, reviewing her notes one last time. Through the windows, the first light of dawn was touching the city streets. 2 minutes to air, the producer called. Sarah took her seat, adjusting the microphone clipped to her blouse. James stood just off camera, his presence reassuring. Detective Suarez was monitoring the security feeds from the back office, while Lucy manned her usual position behind the counter, providing a sense of normalcy to the scene. 30 seconds. Sarah's phone buzzed one last time. Another message from Robert. You really want to do this? Remember what happened to the others who tried to speak out. Remember what you have to lose. Instead of fear, Sarah felt a surge of anger. She showed the message to James, who nodded grimly. Add it to the evidence pile, he said. Every threat just makes our case stronger. 10 seconds. 5, 4, 3. Sarah took a deep breath, thinking of Emma, of all the women Robert had silenced, of the life they could have if she was brave enough to take this stand. Good morning, Diana began as the red light blinked on. I'm Diana Chen, and we're coming to you live from the Morning Brew Cafe with an exclusive interview. With me today is Sarah Carson, the woman at the center of what appeared to be a custody dispute with tech billionaire Robert Carson. But as we're about to learn, this story goes far deeper than a simple family matter. Sarah, thank you for being here today. Sarah looked directly into the camera, her voice steady. Thank you for giving me the chance to tell the truth. As she began to speak, sharing her story with the world, she felt something shift inside her. For the first time in years, she wasn't running from Robert's power. She was facing it head-on, dismantling it piece by piece, with nothing but the truth. Outside, the sun continued to rise, its light streaming through the cafe windows, illuminating Sarah as she spoke. It felt like a sign. The darkness was finally giving way to dawn. The interview had been running for 20 minutes, and Sarah could feel the momentum building. Diana Chen was masterful, guiding the conversation with careful questions that allowed Sarah to tell her story while systematically presenting the evidence they had gathered. Let's talk about the other women, Diana said, her tone compassionate but firm. You mentioned finding files on Robert's server. Yes, Sarah replied, her voice growing stronger. Women who had tried to expose his behavior, his illegal activities. Some were former employees who threatened to report his business practices. Others were women he had relationships with. Each time the pattern was the same: systematic destruction of their credibility, their careers, their lives. On cue, Diana's team displayed documents on the screen: financial records, emails, surveillance reports. The evidence James and Detective Suarez had gathered, showing the full scope of Robert's operation. From his position off-camera, James watched the social media feeds exploding with reactions. Sarah's story was trending, with thousands sharing their own experiences with powerful men who had seemed charming at first, only to reveal their true nature later. Suddenly, Lucy gestured urgently from behind the counter. On her tablet, a breaking news alert scrolled across the screen. Carson Industries Board announces emergency session. CEO Robert Carson's leadership under review. James smiled grimly. The corporate wheels were turning faster than expected. Robert's carefully constructed empire was beginning to crumble, but Sarah wasn't finished. She looked directly into the camera, her voice clear and strong. I'm not just here to expose Robert's abuse. I'm here to tell every woman who's been silenced, who's been afraid, who's been told that no one will believe them, you're not alone. And it's not your fault. Diana leaned forward. You're taking a huge risk by speaking out. Robert Carson is a powerful man with extensive resources. Why come forward now? Because of Emma, Sarah said simply. My daughter deserves to grow up. In a world where the truth matters more than power, where being brave doesn't mean being silent. The interview was reaching its climax when Detective Suarez burst from the back office, her expression urgent. She signaled to James, who quickly read the message on her phone. His face darkened. We've got movement, Suarez whispered as she reached him. Multiple vehicles approaching from different directions. Carson's people. James nodded, already activating contingency plans. Security teams moved into position, while uniformed officers began clearing the surrounding streets. But they had prepared for this. The interview would continue, no matter what. Diana, sensing the tension but maintaining her professional composure, moved to her final questions. Sarah, you mentioned earlier that Robert always wears a specific blue tie when he's planning something dramatic. He wore that tie at his press conference last night. What do you think he's planning? Before Sarah could answer, the cafe's door chimed. Robert Carson himself stood in the doorway, impeccably dressed in his signature blue tie. He's planning to tell his side of the story, Robert said smoothly, walking into frame despite the security teams moving to intercept him. If my wife is going to make such creative accusations, don't I deserve the right to respond? The cafe fell silent. Security personnel surrounded Robert but didn't touch him. He had calculated correctly that they wouldn't risk a physical confrontation on live television. Diana Chen's eyes gleamed with journalistic instinct. This was ratings gold. But it was Sarah's reaction that caught everyone off guard. She didn't flinch, didn't cower. Instead, she smiled. Please, she said calmly. Sit down, Robert. Let's talk about the truth, all of it. The offshore accounts, the women you silenced, the threats, the surveillance. Let's talk about how you use your money and power to control people. Let's talk about why you're really here. Not because you love Emma or me, but because for the first time in your life you're losing control. Robert's confident smile faltered slightly. This wasn't the scared, submissive Sarah he had expected to find. The woman facing him was different, stronger, unafraid. "You've already lost, Robert," Sarah continued. "The board is meeting right now. Your shareholders are jumping ship. Those offshore accounts you thought were hidden, they're being frozen. As we speak, Detective Suarez has been very busy." Robert's face darkened. "You think you can destroy everything I've built? I made you, Sarah. Without me, you're nothing." "No, Robert, you didn't make me. You tried to break me. There's a difference." Sarah stood, her voice carrying clearly through the microphone. "And now everyone can see exactly who you are." As if on cue, Detective Suarez stepped forward, flanked by FBI agents. "Robert Carson, you're under arrest for financial fraud, witness tampering, and multiple counts of stalking and harassment." The look of shock on Robert's face as the agents approached was broadcast live to millions of viewers. His carefully constructed facade cracked completely as he realized that this time, money and influence wouldn't save him. "You can't do this." "To me," he snarled, his charm evaporating. "I own this city, I own you." "Not anymore," Sarah said quietly as the agents led him away. "Not ever again." Diana Chen, consummate professional that she was, turned back to the camera. And there you have it, viewers. A remarkable turn of events in what has become one of the most significant stories of corporate and domestic abuse in recent history. Sarah, thank you for your courage in sharing your story. As the broadcast ended, Sarah sank into her chair, emotionally exhausted but triumphant. James was immediately at her side, while Lucy rushed over with water. "Emma," Sarah said, "I need to see Emma." "Already on her way," Suarez confirmed. "My partner is bringing her here now that it's safe." "You did it, Sarah. You actually did it." "We did it," Sarah corrected, looking at James, Lucy, and Suarez. "All of us." Outside, the morning sun had fully risen, bathing the morning brew in warm light. Regular customers were beginning to arrive, seemingly unaware that they had just witnessed history being made in their favorite cafe. Sarah watched them order their usual coffees, going about their normal lives, and felt a profound sense of peace. For the first time in years, she could do the same. She could just and live. The days following Robert's arrest passed in a whirlwind of activity. Carson Industries' stock plummeted as more evidence of corruption emerged. The board of directors, moving swiftly to salvage the company's reputation, voted unanimously to remove Robert as CEO. His carefully constructed empire was crumbling, one piece at a time. Sarah and Emma had moved into a comfortable apartment provided by James's security team, but they spent most of their time at the morning brew. The cafe had become something of a symbol. People came from all over the city, hoping to sit in the spot where Sarah had taken her stand. Lucy had started serving a new specialty drink called Sunrise Courage, with all proceeds going to organizations supporting survivors of domestic abuse. "Your story is everywhere," Detective Suarez said one morning, showing Sarah her tablet. News outlets worldwide were covering the fall of Robert Carson, but they were focusing on more than just his crimes. They were talking about courage, about standing up to power, about the importance of believing women who spoke out. "The woman from Australia arrived this morning," Suarez continued. "She's willing to testify and she's brought more evidence. 5 other women have come forward too. The prosecutor says this case is solid." Sarah nodded, watching Emma read in her favorite window seat. The little girl had been thriving since their reunion, finally able to stay in one place, to make friends, to just be a child. "What about the custody issue?" "Robert's legal team is in shambles," James answered, joining them with fresh coffee. "Given the criminal charges and the evidence of his behavior, no judge will grant him custody. His parental rights will likely be terminated once he's convicted." Sarah wrapped her hands around the warm coffee mug, allowing herself to feel the full weight of what that meant. Freedom. Real, lasting freedom. "The media wants follow-up interviews," Lucy mentioned, wiping down nearby tables, especially since the Carson Industries whistleblowers started coming forward. It was true. After Robert's arrest, employees had begun speaking out about various corporate crimes they'd witnessed. The company's internal communications had been seized by federal investigators, revealing a pattern of corruption that went far beyond what they'd initially suspected. "I don't want to do any more interviews," Sarah said quietly. "I said what?" I needed to say. "Now I just want to focus on building a life with Emma." James sat beside her, careful to maintain the respectful distance he always kept. Their relationship had evolved into something deep but undefined, a partnership born of crisis, growing into something neither of them was quite ready to name. "The cafe's numbers are up," he mentioned, changing the subject. "Lucy's thinking of extending the hours, hiring more staff." "I'd like to keep working here," Sarah said, surprising herself. "Not because I need to. The lawyer says the civil settlement from Carson Industries will be substantial. But this place, it means something now to me, to others who need hope." "You'll always have a place here," James assured her. "Though I suspect you might want to do more than serve coffee eventually." Sarah smiled, knowing what he meant. Several tech companies had approached her after learning about her software engineering background. The industry had been particularly impressed by how she had detected Robert's hidden server and traced his financial dealings. "Speaking of the future," Suarez interjected, "we need to discuss security arrangements going forward. Robert's still got supporters out there, people who benefited from his corruption. They might—" "No," Sarah interrupted firmly. "We're not living in fear anymore. Take reasonable precautions, yes, but Emma and I need to live our lives. Really live them, not just survive them." Emma looked up from her book at the sound of her name, giving her mother a bright smile. Sarah felt tears prick at her eyes, remembering how rarely her daughter had smiled during their months on the run. "Mommy," Emma called out, "can we go to the park later? The one with the duck pond?" A few months ago, such a public outing would have been unthinkable. Now, Sarah smiled. "Yes, baby. We can feed the ducks." "I'll have plainclothes officers in the area," Suarez said quietly, then held up her hands when Sarah started to protest. "Just for the next few months, until things settle. Then you can be as normal and boring as you want." Sarah laughed. Actually laughed, the sound surprising her. When was the last time she had laughed freely, without fear or restraint? James watched her, something soft in his eyes. "You know, the cafe's security cameras caught something interesting this morning. Want to see?" He pulled up the footage on his tablet. It showed Emma at her usual window seat, but instead of reading, she was writing in a notebook. The camera zoomed in enough to show the words at the top of the page, "My Story" by Emma Mitchell. "She wants to be a writer," Sarah said softly. "She used to be afraid to write anything down in case he found it. But now she's free to tell her own story," James finished. "Just like her mother." Lucy appeared with fresh pastries, setting them on the table. "The morning rush will start soon. You want me to put up the reserved sign on your table?" Sarah shook her head. "No. Let people sit here. Let them see that it's just a normal table in a normal cafe where something extraordinary happened. Let them know they can do extraordinary things too." Outside, the city was coming to life, people hurrying to work, students heading to school, couples walking hand in hand. Normal life, happening all around them. Sarah watched through the window, remembering how she used to envy such simple freedoms. "What are you thinking?" James asked softly. "I'm thinking about that first day here," Sarah replied. "How scared. I was to accept help, to trust anyone, and now look at us. Emma's writing stories, I'm planning park visits, and you're still here." "Always will be," James said simply. "As a friend, as a partner in the cafe, as whatever you need." Sarah turned to look at him fully. "And what if someday we need something more?" Before James could respond, Emma came, running over. "Mommy, I wrote a story. Want to hear it?" "Of course, baby. We all want to hear it." As Emma began to read her tale of brave princesses and loyal knights, Sarah felt James's hand slip into hers under the table. She squeezed it gently, not looking at him, not needing to. They had time now, time to heal, to grow, to figure out what they could be to each other. The morning sun streamed through the cafe windows, warming them all in its light. Just another morning at the Morning Brew, where new beginnings happened one cup of coffee at a time. 3 months after Robert's arrest, the Morning Brew was hosting a special event. The cafe had been transformed for the evening, its usual casual atmosphere replaced with something more ceremonial. Local leaders, survivors' advocates, and media representatives filled the space, all gathered for the launch of the Morning Light Foundation. Sarah stood at the small podium, her hands steady as she addressed the crowd. When I first came to this cafe, I was running from darkness. What I found here wasn't just safety. It was a chance to rebuild, to reclaim my power, to show my daughter what strength really looks like. Emma sat in the front row, beaming proudly at her mother. She wore a new dress for the occasion, her butterfly backpack replaced with a matching purse. Beside her, James watched Sarah with quiet admiration. The Morning Light Foundation, Sarah continued, will provide support for survivors of domestic abuse and corporate harassment. But more than that, it will give them what I found here, a chance to start over, to build something new, to transform from survivors into leaders. The foundation had been James's idea, but Sarah had shaped its mission. Using part of her settlement from Carson Industries, they had created a comprehensive program offering legal aid, job training, housing assistance, and psychological support to survivors. Every morning the sun rises, Sarah said, her voice strong and clear. Every morning we get a chance to begin again. That's what this foundation represents. Not just hope, but action. Not just survival, but triumph. As applause filled the cafe, Sarah caught James's eye. He smiled, that soft, understanding smile that had become so familiar. In the months since Robert's arrest, their relationship had evolved naturally, unhurriedly. They had both needed time. Him to fully process his grief for his first family, her to heal from her trauma. Lucy circulated through the crowd with refreshments, her employee badge now reading General Manager. The cafe had expanded, opening 2 new locations, each dedicated to providing employment opportunities for survivors. She had proven to be an exceptional leader, turning the Morning Brew into more than just a coffee shop. It was a symbol of transformation. Detective Suarez stood near the back, looking satisfied. The case against Robert was proceeding smoothly, with more witnesses coming forward each week. His empire had been dismantled piece by piece, revealing decades of corruption and abuse. But more importantly, his fall had sparked a broader conversation about power, accountability, and the courage to speak out. After the speeches, as the event shifted into a more casual reception, Emma tugged at Sarah's sleeve. "Can I give them my surprise now?" Sarah nodded, and Emma proudly distributed copies of a small booklet to the guests. On the cover was a simple title, The Brave Princess and the Morning Light by Emma Mitchell. "She insisted on using your real last name," James murmured as he joined them. "Said she was proud to be Emma Mitchell, daughter of the bravest mom in the world." Sarah hugged Emma close, breathing in the lavender scent of her hair. No more shelter shampoo samples. They had a home now, a real home, with Emma's room decorated just as she liked it, with shelves full of books and a special corner for writing. "I have a surprise too," James said softly. He led them to the window seat, their window seat, where a small plaque had been installed. It read, "On this spot, courage found its voice and hope found its home." Sarah traced the words with her fingers, remembering all the moments that had led to this. 1. The desperate cry in McDonald's, the first morning at the cafe, the interview that had changed everything. "Too much?" James asked, suddenly uncertain. "No," Sarah said, taking his hand. "It's perfect. This place, it's where everything changed." "Where we all changed." Emma looked between them knowingly. She had watched their relationship develop, had seen the gradual shift from protector and protectee to equals, to friends, to something more. She approved wholeheartedly, telling Sarah one night, "He makes you smile like you mean it, Mummy." The evening wound down, guests departing with foundation brochures and copies of Emma's story. As Lucy and her staff began cleaning up, Sarah found herself back at her usual table, watching the city lights through the window. "Penny, for your thoughts?" James asked, joining her with 2 cups of coffee. "I was thinking about fear," Sarah replied. "How it controlled every moment of my life for so long, and now," she gestured around the cafe, at Emma showing Lucy her latest story ideas, at the foundation brochures outlining their plans to help others, at the simple fact that they were sitting here openly, safely. "Now you're free," James finished. "We're all free," Sarah corrected. "You too. Free to live, to love, to build something new." James reached across the table, taking her hand. "Speaking of building something new, that house on Lake Washington, the one we looked at last week, the one with the library and the boat dock, I made an offer. If you're interested in a change of scenery, you and Emma, I mean. The apartment's getting a bit small for all her books." Sarah squeezed his hand, understanding what he was really asking. "Are you sure you're ready?" "I'll always love Claire and Lily," James said quietly. "But they taught me something important. Life is too precious to waste being afraid of love. Besides," he smiled, "Emma needs a bigger writing space." As if on cue, Emma bounded over. "Can we get ice cream? Lucy says Mario's is still open." Sarah looked at James, who nodded. "Ice cream sounds perfect." As they walked to the ice cream shop, Emma between them holding both their hands, Sarah thought about mornings. How each one brought new light, new chances, new beginnings. The darkness that had defined so much of her life had finally given way to dawn. "Look," Emma pointed at the cafe's sign, now lit up against the night sky. "It's glowing like a lighthouse." "That's what it is," Sarah realized. "A lighthouse in the dark, showing others the way home." James squeezed her hand gently, and Sarah squeezed back. They had all found their way home in the end. Not to a place, but to each other. And that was the greatest victory of all. The Lake Washington house was everything they had hoped for and more. Sunlight sparkled on the water as Sarah helped Emma arrange her books in the new library, a room that had quickly become their favorite space. Floor-to-ceiling windows offered a panoramic view of the lake, while built-in shelves provided the perfect home for their growing collection of books. "Do you think we could write here?" Emma asked, arranging her notebooks on a small desk James had specifically chosen for her. "Like real authors?" "You already are a real author," Sarah reminded her, holding up a copy of Emma's story. The little booklet from the foundation launch had sparked interest from a children's publisher, who saw potential in Emma's tale of courage and new beginnings. The sound of a boat engine drew their attention to the window. James was returning from his morning ride, something that had become a daily ritual. Sarah watched as he skillfully docked the small craft, noting how much more relaxed he seemed these days. The water seemed to wash away his old grief, replacing it with a quiet contentment. "Ms. Chen called again," Sarah mentioned as James joined them in the library, his hair slightly windblown from the boat ride. "They want to do a follow-up piece on the Foundation's first success stories." The Morning Light Foundation had exceeded all expectations. In just 3 months, they had helped 20 women escape abusive situations, providing them with safe housing, job training, and legal support. Lucy had hired 3 of them at the new cafe locations, while others had found positions through the Foundation's corporate partners. "What did you tell her?" James asked, helping Emma organize her writing supplies. "That we'd think about it. The Foundation's work is important, but I don't want it to just become another media story. These women deserve privacy while they rebuild their lives." James nodded, understanding. They had learned to balance public awareness with personal boundaries, using their platform to help others while maintaining their own peace. The doorbell rang and Emma rushed to answer it, knowing who it would be. Detective Suarez had become a regular visitor, often bringing updates on the case against Robert, but staying for Emma's stories and Sarah's cooking. "The prosecutor called," Suarez announced as they settled in the kitchen. "Robert's trying to make a deal." Sarah continued preparing lunch, her movements steady. "What kind of deal?" "He'll plead guilty to the financial crimes if they drop the personal charges, the stalking, the abuse, the harassment." Suarez watched Sarah carefully. "The prosecutor wanted your input before responding." "He's still trying to control the narrative," James observed, admitting to the corporate crimes while denying the personal ones, protecting his image until the end. Sarah placed sandwiches on the table, buying time to think. Through the window, she could see Emma showing Lucy, who had just arrived, her new writing spot by the lake. The sight strengthened her resolve. "Tell the prosecutor no deal," she said firmly. "The financial crimes aren't what made Robert dangerous. It was his need for control, his ability to hurt people while maintaining a respectable facade. That's what needs to be exposed." "The trial will be difficult," Suarez warned. "You'll have to testify, relive everything." "I know, but I won't let him hide the truth anymore. Not for my sake and not for all the other women who deserve justice." James reached for her hand under the table, a gesture that had become natural, comfortable. "Whatever you decide, we're all here for you." Lucy joined them, bringing the scent of coffee and fresh pastries from the morning brew. "The new support group is starting next week," she reported. 10 women signed up already. They specifically asked if you would come speak, Sarah. "I don't know what I'd say to them," Sarah admitted. "Tell them about the window seat," Emma suggested, returning from her lakeside writing session, "about how sometimes the bravest thing is just letting people help you." Sarah smiled at her. "Daughter's wisdom. When did you get so smart?" "I learned from watching you, Mummy." The afternoon sun filled the kitchen with warm light as they shared lunch, their conversation flowing easily between foundation business and personal matters. Lucy talked about expanding the cafe's mentorship program, while Suarez shared updates on the ongoing investigation into Robert's corporate empire. "Oh, I almost forgot," Lucy said, pulling something from her bag. "The contractor finished the renovations at the original cafe. He asked where you wanted to put this." She handed Sarah a small brass key, the one from the backup generator room where she and Emma had hidden that night Robert came for them. Sarah turned it over in her hands, remembering the fear, the darkness, the uncertainty. "We should frame it," James suggested. "Put it next to Emma's first story in the library, a reminder of how far we've come and how far we still can go," Sarah added, looking around at the family they had built. Not through blood or marriage, but through choice and love and shared courage. Emma was already writing in her notebook, no doubt turning their conversation into another story. Lucy and Suarez were discussing security upgrades for the new foundation offices, their professional relationship having evolved into genuine friendship. And James was looking at her with that quiet understanding that made her heart feel full. Later, as the sun began to set over the lake, Sarah found James standing on the dock, watching the changing colors reflect on the water. She joined, him breathing in the peaceful evening air. "Ready for tomorrow?" he asked. They had an appointment with a real estate agent, not for themselves but for the foundation's next project, a transitional housing complex for women and children leaving abusive situations. "Ready," Sarah confirmed. "Emma wants to help design the children's spaces. She says every kid needs a special place to read and write and dream." "Smart girl," James smiled. "Just like her mother." Sarah leaned against him slightly, allowing herself to feel the simple joy of this moment. Above them, the first stars were beginning to appear, their light reflected in the calm lake water. A perfect ending to another day of their new beginning. 6 months after moving to the lake house, Sarah stood once again in the morning brew, but this time everything was different. The cafe was closed for a private event, the launch of Emma's first published book, The Brave Princess and the Morning Light. The story had grown from her simple foundation booklet into a beautiful children's book, with illustrations that captured both the darkness of fear and the brightness of hope. The window seat where everything had begun was now marked not just by James's plaque, but by a small collection of photographs showing the cafe's journey. Sarah's interview, the foundation launch, and now this celebration of Emma's achievement. Each image told part of their story, but more importantly, showed others that new stories were always possible. "They're ready for you," Lucy announced, adjusting the display of books on the counter. The cafe was filled with family, friends, and supporters, the community that had grown around them over the past months. Emma stood at the small podium, looking poised despite her nervousness. At 10 years old, she had already lived through more than most children, but instead of breaking her, it had given her a voice. And now she was using that voice to help others. "My story began in a different cafe," Emma started, her clear voice carrying through the room, "where my mommy and I were hungry and scared. But it really started to change right here in this special place, where brave people helped us find our courage." Sarah felt James's arms slip around her waist as they watched Emma speak. Their relationship had deepened naturally over the months, built on understanding, respect, and shared purpose. They hadn't rushed anything, allowing Emma's comfort to guide their pace. Now they were discussing marriage, not as a fairy tale ending, but as a conscious choice to build a life together. Detective Suarez stood near the back, as always, but now she was accompanied by her wife and their recently adopted daughter, a family built on the same foundations of choice and love that Sarah had found. The detective had become more than just their protector. She was part of their extended family. The brave princess in my story learns that sometimes the scariest thing is asking for help, Emma continued, but that's also where the magic begins. Like when my mommy let people help us, and now we get to help others. The Morning Light Foundation had grown beyond their initial dreams. They had opened 3 transitional homes, launched job training programs, and created a network of support that stretched across the state. Sarah now worked full-time as the foundation's director, using her tech skills to create secure systems for protecting survivors' information. And sometimes, Emma added with a smile, the knight who helps you isn't what you expect. Sometimes, it's a businessman who makes really good coffee, or a police officer who becomes your friend, or a cafe manager who gives you a safe place to read. The audience chuckled, recognizing the references to James, Suarez, and Lucy. Even the publisher had insisted on keeping these elements in the book, understanding that real heroes often came in unexpected forms. As Emma began reading from her book, Sarah glanced around the cafe. The Morning Brew had expanded, but this original location remained special. Lucy had preserved its warm, welcoming atmosphere while adding subtle security features and support resources. It was still a cafe, but it was also a sanctuary, a beginning point for others seeking their own fresh start. The trial against Robert was proceeding, with more evidence emerging each day. He had finally lost everything: his company, his power, his carefully constructed public image. But Sarah no longer defined her life by his destruction. She had built something far more meaningful in its place. And the brave princess learned, Emma read from the final pages, that the morning light isn't just about the sun rising. It's about the light we find in each other, the light that helps us be brave, the light that shows us the way home. After the reading, as guests mingled and Emma signed books with endearing seriousness, Sarah found herself back at the window seat. James joined her carrying 2 cups of coffee. "Thinking deep thoughts?" he asked. "Remembering," Sarah replied. "That first morning, when you offered me a job. I was so sure it was a trap, that nothing good could last. Now look at us." James smiled, taking her hand. The simple gold band on her finger caught the light. They had gotten married 2 weeks ago, a small ceremony by the lake with Emma as their flower girl and official storyteller. "Speaking of looking at us," he said, "Emma has an announcement. She wants to make. She's been waiting for the right moment." Sarah raised an eyebrow as Emma bounded over, her face glowing with excitement. "I'm writing a new book," Emma declared, "about different kinds of families and how love is what makes them real. And," she paused dramatically, "I want to dedicate it to my dad." Sarah's heart skipped a beat, but Emma wasn't finished. "To James," she clarified, "who showed us that. Real dads are the ones who choose to love you, who help you be brave, and who make really good hot chocolate with extra marshmallows." James's eyes glistened as he pulled Emma into a hug. Sarah watched them, her own eyes filling with tears of joy. This was what healing looked like, not the absence of past pain, but the presence of new love freely given and freely received. The afternoon sun streamed through the cafe windows, casting long, warm shadows. Outside, life went on as usual, people hurrying past, caught up in their own stories. But inside the Morning Brew, something magical had happened. A family had been forged, hope had been restored, and love had proven stronger than fear. Emma's voice carried across the cafe as she showed her publisher the first draft of her new book. Lucy chatted with foundation supporters, while Suarez and her family enjoyed special Brave Princess cookies. And Sarah and James sat in their window seat, watching it all, their hands clasped together, their hearts full of morning light. 1 year to the day after Sarah's interview at the Morning Brew, the cafe hosted another milestone event. The trial against Robert Carson had concluded, and the verdict was in. Sarah sat in her usual window seat, surrounded by her chosen family, watching the news coverage on the cafe's television. Breaking news: tech billionaire Robert Carson found guilty on all counts, the headline scrolled across the screen. The camera showed Robert being led from the courthouse, his designer suits replaced by prison attire, his commanding presence diminished by the weight of justice. The jury deliberated for less than 6 hours, Detective Suarez explained, reading from her phone. 25 years minimum, no possibility of early release. The corporate charges alone would have put him away for 15, but the personal crimes, the stalking, the abuse, the harassment of multiple victims, those were what sealed his fate. Emma, who had insisted on being present for this moment, squeezed Sarah's hand. "Is it really over, Mommy?" "Yes, baby," Sarah answered, pulling her daughter close. "He can't hurt anyone else now." James brought over fresh coffee for everyone, the special blend Lucy had created for important occasions. The Foundation's legal team just called. With the conviction secured, they can move forward with helping the other victims reclaim their assets. Robert's entire fortune will be divided among the people he hurt. Sarah nodded, but money had long ceased to be her primary concern. The Morning Light Foundation had grown beyond their wildest expectations, with branches opening in 3 other states. Each location centered around a cafe, safe spaces where people could find not just refuge but community. Lucy, now the regional director of cafe operations, was training other survivors to manage the new locations. "We just hired our 50th graduate from the Foundation's program," she announced proudly. "The new Seattle location opens next month." The cafe had filled with supporters and friends, survivors who had found their voice, advocates who had fought alongside them, and new faces just beginning their journey to freedom. Sarah watched as they comforted and congratulated each other, marveling at the strength of the community they had built. Diana Chen, who had become a close friend since the interview that changed everything, arrived with advance copies of her new book. Justice Served, The Fall of Robert Carson and the Rise of Survivor Advocacy, wasn't just about Robert's crimes. It was about the movement that had grown from Sarah's courage to speak out. "The publisher wants to know if you'll write the foreword for the 2nd edition," Diana told Sarah. "They're adding a chapter about the Foundation's impact." Sarah looked around the cafe, at the walls now covered with photos and stories of survival and triumph. Each image represented someone who had found their way to morning light. "I'll do it," she said. "But I want to focus on the future, not the past, on what we're building, not what we escaped." Emma, who had been scribbling in her ever-present notebook, looked up. "Can I help write it? I have some ideas about hope." James smiled at his stepdaughter's enthusiasm. The adoption papers had been finalized last month, making official what they had all known in their hearts. They were a family, bound by choice and love rather than blood. "Actually," Sarah said, "I think you should write it, Emma. You see things in a way the rest of us sometimes forget to." The afternoon sun cast long shadows through the cafe windows, but now those shadows held no fear. They were just part of the natural rhythm of light and dark, a reminder that every night, no matter how long, gave way to dawn. Lucy began setting up for a special afternoon service. The cafe's regular customers had learned to expect surprises on important days. Today's menu featured Victory Vanilla Lattes and Freedom Fruit Tarts, with all proceeds going to the Foundation's new children's program. "The contractor called," James mentioned as they helped arrange tables for the incoming crowd. "The new Foundation headquarters will be ready next month. Emma's reading room is already finished." The reading room had been Emma's idea, a special space within each Foundation location where children could feel safe, read, write, and begin to heal. Her own experiences had taught her the power of stories to light the way through darkness. Sarah watched as Emma showed Diana her latest writing project, a series of short stories about different kinds of courage. At 10 years old, she had already published 2 books, with a 3rd on the way. But more importantly, she had found her voice and was using it to help others find theirs. "Remember that first morning?" Lucy asked, joining them at the window seat. "When you were so scared to accept even a cup of coffee?" "I remember everything," Sarah said softly. The fear, the doubt, the desperate hope that this time might be different. She looked at James, who had given her not just safety, but the space to find her own strength. At Lucy, whose kindness had been the first crack in her walls of isolation. At Suarez, whose dedication to justice had helped make this day possible. But mostly, she continued, I remember the moment I decided to trust, not just in others, but in myself. In the possibility that fear didn't have to be forever. Outside, a young woman stood hesitating at the cafe's door, clutching a flyer for the Foundation's support group. Sarah recognized the look in her eyes, the mix of desperation and hope she had once seen in her own reflection. "Excuse me," Sarah said, standing up. She walked to the door and opened it, smiling warmly at the woman. "Would you like to come in? We're just about to have coffee." The woman blinked back tears, nodding slightly. As Sarah led her to the window seat, she heard Emma's voice rise above the cafe's gentle buzz. Once upon a time, in a cafe filled with morning light, a scared heart found its courage. Sarah smiled, knowing that another story of healing was about to begin. The celebration of Robert's conviction continued into the evening, but with a subtle shift in focus. Instead of dwelling on the past, the conversations turned toward the future, plans for new foundation programs, expanding cafe locations, and innovative ways to help survivors rebuild their lives. Sarah found herself drawn to the quiet corner, where the young woman she had welcomed earlier sat talking with Lucy. Their voices were too low to hear, but Sarah recognized the pattern, the tentative sharing of truth, the gradual realization that understanding and help were real possibilities. "She reminds me of you," James said softly, joining her. "That first day, when you were trying so hard to be invisible while protecting Emma." Sarah leaned into him slightly, drawing strength from his steady presence. "Sometimes I still can't believe how much has changed, not just the external things, but in here." She touched her heart. The fear used to be so constant, so consuming. Now it feels like a distant memory. Emma bounded over, her notebook clutched to her chest. "Mommy, Miss Diana says my new story could help other kids understand about different kinds of families. She wants to introduce me to her publisher." "That's wonderful, sweetheart," Sarah smiled, smoothing her daughter's hair. Emma's writing had become more than just personal expression. It was a bridge helping other children process their experiences of trauma and healing. Detective Suarez approached with her family, her daughter shyly showing Emma a story she had written inspired by Emma's books. The two girls quickly disappeared to the window seat, heads bent together over their shared passion for storytelling. "The FBI task force wants to use the Foundation's model nationwide," Suarez reported. "They're especially interested in the cafe concept, safe spaces that don't look like safe spaces, where people can find help without feeling exposed." Lucy joined them, her face glowing with purpose. "We just got another call from Chicago. They want to open a morning brew there, connected to their domestic violence support services." "It's amazing," James mused, "how something that started with a desperate cry for help in a McDonald's has grown into all this." Sarah watched as more people filtered into the cafe, survivors sharing their stories, advocates planning new initiatives, children finding friendship and understanding. The morning brew had become more than just a cafe or even a sanctuary. It was a beacon, showing others that transformation was possible. "I've been thinking," Sarah said, turning to James, "about Claire and Lily." James tensed slightly. His first wife and daughter were still a tender subject, though he had learned to speak of them with love rather than just pain. "They're part of this too," Sarah continued gently. "Your love for them, your grief, it opened your heart to helping us. Their story is woven into the Foundation's story, into our family's story." James's eyes glistened. Claire would have loved all this. She was always trying to find ways to help people, to make a difference. And Lily... He smiled at Emma, still, deep in conversation with Suarez's daughter. She would have been right there with Emma, writing stories and planning reading rooms. "Then we should honor them," Sarah suggested. "The new children's center we're planning. What if we called it the Claire and Lily Lighthouse? A place where children can find their way through darkness just like Emma did? James pulled her close, too moved for words. Across the cafe, Emma looked up and smiled, as if sensing the moment's importance. She had known about Claire and Lily from the beginning, understanding that love didn't have to be exclusive, that families could grow in unexpected ways, encompassing both those present and those remembered. The young woman Lucy had been counseling stood up, wiping tears from her eyes, but they were healing tears, the kind that came with the first taste of hope. Lucy led her to the Foundation's information desk, where she could begin the process of rebuilding her life. "You know what I love most about this place?" Emma asked, returning to them with her new friend. "It's not just about helping people escape bad things. It's about helping them find good things, like how we found each other." Sarah hugged her daughter, marveling at her wisdom. "That's exactly right, baby. It's about transformation, not just survival." As the evening drew to a close, the cafe began to quiet. Lucy started her closing routine, though the space would remain open for anyone who needed it. The morning brew never truly closed its doors to those seeking sanctuary. Sarah stood at the window, watching the city lights twinkle against the darkening sky. She remembered all the nights she had spent afraid of darkness, and now here she was, helping others find their way to light. James wrapped his arms around her from behind, and Emma snuggled against her side. Their reflection in the window showed what Sarah had once thought impossible, a complete family, built from broken pieces, made stronger by their very mending. "Ready to go home?" James asked softly. Sarah turned to survey the cafe one last time, the window seat where her journey had begun, the counter where Lucy had first shown her kindness, the spaces now filled with stories of healing and hope. "Yes," she said, taking Emma's hand. "But we'll be back tomorrow morning. There's always another sunrise to share, another story to begin." As they left, the cafe's lights cast a warm glow onto the street, a beacon in the gathering dusk. Inside, Lucy welcomed another hesitant visitor, offering coffee and understanding. Detective Suarez's daughter showed Emma's books to a young newcomer. The cycle of healing continued. One cup of coffee, one story, one brave heart at a time. Because that was the true magic of the morning brew. It wasn't just about serving coffee or even providing sanctuary. It was about showing people that every ending could become a new beginning, that every night gave way to dawn, and that with the right blend of courage and love, anyone could find their way to morning light. Spring arrived with a burst of promise. At the lake house, the garden Emma had planted, a mixture of flowers and vegetables she insisted on tending herself, was beginning to show its first green shoots. Like everything in their lives now, it was a symbol of growth and renewal. Sarah sat on the deck reviewing applications for the Foundation's newest initiative. The Claire and Lily Lighthouse was set to open in just 2 weeks, and the response had been overwhelming. Families seeking help, volunteers offering support, and corporate sponsors wanting to be part of something meaningful. "The contractors just finished the reading room," James announced, joining her with fresh coffee. "Emma's been arranging the books all morning. She has a very specific system." Sarah smiled, knowing their daughter's dedication to creating perfect spaces for other children. Emma had transformed her own experiences into a mission to help others, showing wisdom far beyond her years. Inside, they could hear Emma on a video call with her publisher. Her third book, Different Kinds of Brave, was already generating excitement. It told the stories of various families who had found help through the Foundation, each tale celebrating a unique journey to healing. Lucy arrived for their weekly Foundation meeting, bringing pastries from the morning brew and news about their expansion plans. "The Chicago location opens next month," she reported, "and we've had inquiries from Portland, Denver, and Boston. The model is spreading." The model had evolved far beyond their initial vision. Each new morning brew location served as both a cafe and a support center, offering everything from emergency assistance to job training. The Foundation's success stories were mounting, women who had escaped abuse, rebuilt their lives, and gone on to help others do the same. "Diana called," Lucy continued. "The documentary team wants to start filming next week. They think following a year in the life of the Foundation could help reach even more people who need help." Sarah had initially hesitated about the documentary, protective of their community's privacy. But Emma, with her storyteller's heart, had convinced her. Stories help people be brave, Mommy, remember. The doorbell rang and Emma rushed to answer it. She knew Thursday afternoons meant Detective Suarez would be visiting. The detective had become such a regular part of their lives that Emma had given her a special character in her new book. Officer Hope, who helped scared families find their way to safety. The task force has some interesting news, Suarez announced as they settled in the living room. Remember those offshore accounts we traced during Robert's trial? They led us to 3 more corporate abuse cases, more survivors coming forward, ready to tell their stories. Sarah absorbed this information, no longer feeling the old fear at mentions of Robert or his crimes. His power had been not just broken, but transformed. His frozen assets now funded programs helping the very people he had once hurt. The Foundation's legal team is ready to help, James said. We've learned a lot about supporting survivors through the justice system. Emma appeared with her notebook, as she always did when adults were having important conversations. Her writing had become a way of processing the world around her, turning even difficult subjects into stories of hope and courage. I think, Emma said thoughtfully, we should have a celebration. Not because of the bad things that happened, but because of all the good things that came after. Like my garden, sometimes you have to clear away the old stuff before new things can grow. The adults exchanged smiles at her metaphor. Emma's perspective often cut straight to the heart of matters, reminding them that healing wasn't just about overcoming past pain, it was about cultivating future joy. Actually, Lucy said, that's perfect timing. The original Morning Brew is marking its 2nd anniversary next month, the place where everything started, where a scared mum and her daughter found more than just coffee, Emma added, already writing in her notebook, where morning light showed them the way home. Sarah reached for James's hand, remembering that first desperate morning, how far they had come. The Morning Brew had been just a cafe then, but it had grown into something extraordinary, a blueprint for hope, replicated across the country. We should invite everyone, Emma continued excitedly. All the families we've helped, all the people who helped us. Show them how one small brave thing can grow into something huge. Like your garden, James asked, smiling. Exactly. One seed at a time, but pretty soon. Emma gestured expansively. You have a whole garden of beautiful things. Sarah watched, her daughter's enthusiasm, marveling at how trauma had been transformed into triumph, fear into strength, pain into purpose. Emma would always carry the memories of their difficult times, but she had alchemized them into something precious, the ability to help others find their own path to healing. As they began planning the anniversary celebration, Sarah stepped out onto the deck again. The lake sparkled in the afternoon sun, and she could see the first colorful buds in Emma's garden. Life was like that, she realized. Given the right conditions, beauty could bloom even in spaces once shadowed by fear. Inside, she could hear Emma describing her vision for the celebration to Lucy and Suarez, her voice filled with the confidence of someone who knew her ideas mattered. Her stories had power. Her love could help change lives. You okay? James, do you? Asked, joining her outside. More than okay, Sarah replied, leaning into him. I was just thinking about all the different ways people can find their light. Sometimes it's through a cup of coffee and a kind word, and sometimes it's through a little girl who refuses to stop believing in hope, James finished, watching Emma through the window as she excitedly outlined her plans. The garden's new shoots reached toward the sun, promising future blooms. Like the survivors they helped each day, like Emma's stories, like their own hearts, growing, healing, thriving in the light of new mornings. The Morning Brew's 2nd anniversary celebration transformed the cafe into a testament of hope. Photos lined the walls, not just of Sarah and Emma's journey, but of countless others who had found their way to healing. Each image told a story of transformation, of darkness giving way to dawn. Emma, dressed in a flower-patterned dress that matched the blooms from her garden, stood proudly beside her latest book display. Different kinds of brave had already touched many lives, its simple wisdom helping children understand that families could be rebuilt, that love could heal, that hope was always possible. "Your daughter's quite the author," Diana Chen remarked to Sarah, watching as Emma signed books for a line of young readers. "She has a way of making difficult truths accessible, even beautiful." "She learned early that stories have power," Sarah replied. "The ones we tell ourselves, the ones we share with others, they can trap us in fear or lead us to freedom." The cafe buzzed with celebration. Lucy orchestrated a team of baristas, many of them foundation graduates, serving special anniversary blend coffee and pastries decorated with sunrise motifs. Detective Suarez and her family mingled with other law enforcement partners who had helped build the foundation's support network. James stood near the window seat, deep in conversation with corporate sponsors about the next phase of expansion. The foundation's success had attracted powerful allies, turning the Morning Light model into a nationwide movement. "Mommy!" Emma called out excitedly. "Come see what we made." Sarah joined her daughter at a large display board covered with photographs and handwritten notes. At the center was the original plaque from their window seat, but surrounding it were messages from people whose lives had been touched by the foundation. "Look," Emma pointed to a particular note. "This one's from the first family we helped after we got safe. Remember them?" Sarah remembered, a mother and 2 children who had arrived at the cafe just months after her own interview. The mother's story had echoed Sarah's in many ways, but now her note spoke of healing, of a new job, of children thriving in safety. "And this one," Emma continued, "is from that girl who didn't think she could write stories because she was too scared. Now, she's publishing her own book." The display was a tapestry of triumph, stories of survivors becoming advocates, of children finding their voices, of fear transformed into strength. Each note, each photo, each smile represented a life redirected toward hope. Lucy appeared, with a special anniversary cake, its decorations depicting a sunrise over coffee cups. "Time for the ceremony," she announced. The cafe quieted as Sarah took her place at the small podium. Looking out at the gathered faces, some familiar, some new, all part of their extended family of healing, she felt overwhelming gratitude. 2 years ago, she began, this cafe became more than just a place to get coffee. It became a sanctuary, a starting point, a symbol of what's possible when people choose to help each other. But the real magic isn't in these walls. It's in every person who finds the courage to take that first step toward morning light. Emma joined her at the podium, clutching her notebook. "And in every person who helps others find their brave," she added, drawing soft laughter and tears from the audience. "The foundation has grown beyond our wildest dreams," Sarah continued, "but at its heart it remains simple. One person reaching out to another, offering coffee, understanding, and hope. Just as James and Lucy once did for Emma and me." James moved to stand beside them, his presence strong and steady. They were a family forged in adversity but strengthened by love, proof that healing was possible, that joy could follow pain, that light always returned after darkness. "So today," Sarah concluded, "we celebrate not just our story but all of yours. Every person who has found shelter here, every heart that has begun to heal, every family that has been rebuilt. You are the true morning light, spreading hope, one dawn at a time." As applause filled the cafe, Emma tugged at Sarah's sleeve. "Can I read something? I wrote it for today." Sarah nodded, stepping back as Emma opened her notebook. The cafe quieted again, ready to hear the young author's words. "Morning light isn't just about the sun," Emma read, her voice clear and confident. "It's about the light we find in each other. The light that shows us we're not alone. The light that helps us grow like my garden at home, one seed, one flower, one brave heart at a time." She looked up at her mother and James, then out at the gathered crowd. "Sometimes the bravest thing is just believing in morning light, even when it's dark. But that's okay because we don't have to be brave alone. We have each other, we have love, we have coffee." Laughter and tears mingled as Emma continued. "And maybe that's the biggest magic of all, that scared hearts can become strong hearts, that broken families can become whole families, that one small cafe can become a place where morning light lasts forever." As Emma finished reading, Sarah pulled her close, feeling James's arms encircle them both. Around them, the cafe buzzed with life and hope, survivors sharing stories, children drawing pictures of sunrise, advocates planning new initiatives. Through the window, the actual morning light painted the city in gold, touching everything with promise. But the real light, Sarah knew, was right here, in every smile, every tear, every cup of coffee shared between healing hearts. The morning. Peru had become more than they had ever imagined, but its essence remained unchanged. It was still a place where hope began, where courage was born, where morning light showed the way home. And that light, like the love that had brought them all together, would shine forever. The autumn brought change to the morning brew, as predictable as the shifting colors of the leaves outside. The cafe had expanded its second floor, creating a dedicated space for the Foundation's growing programs. On this particular morning, Sarah watched from her new office as a group of women gathered for their weekly support meeting. The Chicago location just helped their 100th family, Lucy reported, bringing in their morning coffee, and Boston's already exceeding expectations. They're asking about opening a second cafe there. Sarah smiled, remembering when one small cafe had seemed like an impossible dream. Now the morning brew had become a beacon of hope across the country, each location offering not just sanctuary, but a path to rebuilding shattered lives. Emma's publisher called, Lucy continued. They want to create a special edition of all 3 of her books, with new illustrations and a companion guide for parents and counselors. They say the books are becoming essential tools for helping children process trauma and understand different types of families. As if summoned by the mention of her name, Emma burst into the office, her school backpack bouncing. At 11, she had grown taller, but her eyes still held that same mixture of wisdom and hope that had touched so many hearts. "Mom, Dad, the school approved my idea." She pulled out a carefully prepared presentation folder. "They're going to let me start a writing club for kids who need to tell their stories." James appeared in the doorway, having heard Emma's excited voice from his own office across the hall. The Foundation's rapid growth had required both of them to take on more formal roles, but they always made time for Emma's projects. "That's wonderful, sweetheart," Sarah said, examining Emma's detailed plans. The writing club would provide a safe space for children to express their feelings through stories, just as Emma had done. "And guess what else?" Emma continued, practically bouncing with excitement. "Remember that girl from the shelter in Denver? The one who read my book and started writing her own stories. Her mum says she's going to start a writing club at her school too." Sarah exchanged proud glances with James. Their daughter's impact continued to ripple outward, touching lives far beyond their immediate community. Emma's simple stories about hope and healing had become a catalyst for change, inspiring others to find their own voices. "Detective Suarez is bringing someone to meet us today," James mentioned, his tone carefully neutral. "A family that just escaped a situation in Portland. They need more than what our center there can provide." Sarah nodded, understanding the unspoken message. Some cases required special attention, a more personal touch. "I'll meet with them in the cafe. It's less intimidating than an office. Can I help?" Emma asked, already reaching for her notebook. "Sometimes kids feel better when they can talk to another kid who understands." Sarah hugged her daughter, marveling at her intuitive grasp of healing. "Of course, baby. Your stories always help." Later that morning, Sarah sat at their window seat watching a nervous mother and her young son enter the cafe. Detective Suarez had briefed her on their situation, another case of corporate power used to control and manipulate, echoing her own past with Robert. But now, instead of feeling triggered by these similarities, Sarah found strength in them. She knew exactly what this mother was feeling, what she needed to hear, what kind of support would help her rebuild. Emma approached them first, offering the boy one of her books and a gentle smile. "Would you like to read with me? This is my special reading spot. It's where my mum and I started feeling brave again." As the children settled into the window seat, Sarah spoke softly with the mother, sharing not just resources and practical help, but understanding. She could see the moment hope began to spark in the woman's eyes, the same spark that had changed her own life 2 years ago. Lucy brought over hot chocolate for the children and coffee for the adults. Her presence, as warm and reassuring as ever. Through the windows, the autumn sun painted everything in soft gold, a reminder of how light could transform even the darkest moments. "You're safe here," Sarah told the mother, echoing the words that had once been said to her. "And not just safe, you're going to thrive. We'll help you build something new, something strong." The woman's tears fell into her coffee cup, but they were tears of relief, of possibility. Her son had already relaxed into Emma's storytelling, his small face animated as she showed him her favorite illustrations. James observed from the counter, his heart full. This was their legacy, not just helping individual families, but creating a ripple effect of healing that spread far beyond their original vision. Detective Suarez joined him, watching the scene unfold. "You know," she said quietly, "when we first started working together, I thought we were just trying to stop one bad man. I never imagined it would grow into all this." "None of us did," James replied. "But that's the thing about morning light. Once it starts spreading, there's no containing it." Emma's voice carried across the cafe as she read from her book, and the brave little girl learned that her story wasn't just for her. It was for everyone who needed to remember that morning light always comes, even after the longest night. On a quiet Sunday morning, the Morning Brew opened its doors for a special private event. The cafe had been transformed once again, but this time for a more intimate celebration. Emma's 12th birthday party was more than just a gathering of family and friends. It was a testament to the healing power of love and community. The window seat, where their story had begun, was decorated with Emma's favorite flowers, grown in her own garden. Her books were displayed proudly nearby, including advance copies of the special edition trilogy that would soon be distributed to counseling centers nationwide. "I had a dream last night," Emma announced as she helped Lucy arrange pastries on the birthday display. "I dreamed about that first day here, when Mom was so scared but tried to be brave for me. And in my dream, I could see all the light that was waiting for us, even though we didn't know it yet." Sarah pulled her daughter close, breathing in the lavender scent of her hair, no longer from shelter samples, but from the plants they grew together in their garden. "You always saw the light, baby. You helped me see it too." The cafe filled with their chosen family. Detective Suarez and her wife arrived with their daughter, who had become one of Emma's closest friends. Diana Chen brought news about the documentary's impact. Healing centers across the country were using it to show survivors that transformation was possible. James watched from behind the counter, where he was preparing Emma's special birthday drink, a hot chocolate creation they had perfected together during weekend experiments. His thoughts drifted to Claire and Lily, feeling not the sharp pain of loss, but a gentle gratitude for how love could expand, creating space for both memory and new joy. The Claire and Lily Lighthouse received its 100th family this week, Lucy reported, joining him at the counter. "The reading room is always full. Those girls, their light keeps spreading." Emma's school writing club had grown into a network of young authors supporting each other through storytelling. Some of them were at the party, sharing their latest works and planning new projects. Their stories, inspired by Emma's books, dealt with everything from family changes to finding courage in difficult times. "Mom," Emma called out, "can I make the special announcement now?" Sarah nodded, watching as her daughter gathered everyone's attention. Emma stood in her favorite spot, by the window, sunlight streaming around her like a halo. "So you all know I've been working on something secret," Emma began, her excitement barely contained. "And today, I can finally tell you about it. The Foundation is starting a new program called Stories of Light. It's going to help kids in all our centers write and share their own books." The cafe erupted in applause. Emma had been developing this idea for months, working with publishers and counselors to create a program that would give other children the same healing outlet she had found through writing. "And there's more," Emma continued. "Remember that first little book I wrote here? The Brave Princess and the Morning Light? Well," she paused dramatically, "they're going to make it into a play. Kids from all the Foundation centers can be in it, telling their own stories of finding morning light." Sarah felt tears in her eyes as she watched her daughter share her vision. Emma had transformed her own pain into purpose, her fear into strength, her story into a beacon for others. She was no longer just the little girl who had cried out for help in a crowded McDonald's. She was a force for change in her own right. James joined them by the window, wrapping an arm around each of them. Through the glass, they could see new families arriving at the cafe, some for coffee, some for sanctuary, all finding what they needed in this space of hope and healing. "You know what I wish?" Emma said softly. "I wish every scared person could feel what we feel right now. This kind of love, this kind of safe." "They will, baby," Sarah assured her. "One story at a time, one cup of coffee at a time, one morning light at a time." The party continued, filled with laughter and plans for the future. Emma's friends from the writing club shared their latest stories. Lucy's trainees practiced their barista skills, each cup of coffee served with understanding and hope. Detective Suarez discussed expanding the Foundation's legal support services, while Diana planned future documentaries about their growing impact. As the afternoon sun began to fade, Emma gathered everyone for one last moment. "I want to read you something," she said, opening her ever-present notebook. "It's the ending of my new story, but it's really just a beginning." Her clear voice filled the cafe. "Morning light isn't just about the sun rising. It's about the light we carry inside us, the light we share with others, the light that shows us the way home. And once you find that light, you can never really lose it, because it becomes part of who you are, part of who we all are together. And that kind of light, it lasts forever." Sarah held James's hand tightly as their daughter's words washed over them. Through the windows of the morning brew, they could see the sun beginning its descent, painting the sky in brilliant colors. But inside the cafe, the light remained, in every smile, every story, every cup of coffee shared between healing hearts. This was their legacy, not just a foundation or a cafe chain or a series of books, but a movement of hope that continued to grow and spread. What had begun with a desperate cry for help had become a symphony of healing, each voice adding its own note to the song of morning light. And in that light they were all transformed, from victims to survivors, from survivors to leaders, from broken to beautifully whole. Their story hadn't ended. It had simply opened the door for countless others to begin their own journeys toward dawn. In the morning brew, where it had all begun, the light would always shine, guiding others home to hope, to healing, to love that lasted beyond any darkness. Because that was the true magic of morning light. It was endless, eternal, forever. On the 5th anniversary of Sarah's interview at the Morning Brew, the cafe hosted a different kind of celebration. The national premiere of Emma's play, The Brave Princess and the Morning Light, would be performed simultaneously at Morning Brew locations across the country, each featuring local children who had found healing through the Foundation's programs. The original cafe, where it had all begun, was packed with familiar faces and new friends. The window seat, still marked by its commemorative plaque, now served as part of the stage area where Emma, at 12, would direct the performance that had grown from her own story of healing. "Every child in the play has their own story," Emma explained to Diana Chen, who was covering the event for a special broadcast. "We changed some parts so they could add their own experiences. Because bravery looks different for everyone, but it always leads to light." Sarah watched from behind the counter as Emma confidently organized her young cast. Her daughter had grown into a remarkable young person, using her voice not just to tell her own story, but to help others find the courage to tell theirs. "Remember when she was too scared to write anything down?" James murmured, joining Sarah at the counter. "Now look at her, playwright, author, and inspiration to children across the country." Lucy approached with a special delivery, copies of the Foundation's latest annual report. The Morning Light Foundation now operated in 15 states, each location anchored by a morning brew cafe. But more impressive than the numbers were the stories: countless lives transformed, families rebuilt, hearts healed. "The woman from Portland is here," Lucy said softly, nodding toward the door. Sarah turned to see the mother and son they had helped 6 months ago. The transformation was remarkable. Both carried themselves with confidence now, their eyes bright with hope. The boy had joined Emma's writing club and was now playing a role in the play. Detective Suarez arrived with more news. Robert's appeal was denied, she reported quietly. And there's more. 3 more corporations have been exposed using his tactics. The Foundation's legal team is already working with the survivors. Sarah absorbed this information with calm determination. Robert's legacy of fear had been completely transformed into a force for positive change. Every attempt he had made to control and destroy had instead led to more healing, more hope, more light. "Places, everyone," Emma called out, her voice carrying across the cafe. The young performers took their positions, each wearing a t-shirt decorated with a sunrise design. As the play began, Sarah felt James's arm slip around her waist. Together, they watched their daughter guide her cast through the story. Not just their story anymore, but one that belonged to everyone who had ever needed to find their way to morning light. The young actors moved through scenes that paralleled their own experiences. A mother and child seeking safety, kind strangers offering help, a community coming together to protect and support. But each scene also contained elements unique to the performers' own journeys, making the play a tapestry of shared healing. Emma had written a new ending for the play, different from her book. In this version, the brave princess didn't just find her own light, she learned how to share it with others, creating a chain of hope that grew stronger with each link. As Sarah watched, she noticed something remarkable. The audience wasn't just watching the play, they were part of it. Every person in the cafe had contributed to this moment, this movement of transformation. From Lucy's gentle kindness to Suarez's determined justice, from James's steady support to the courage of countless survivors who had found their way to morning light. Through the cafe's windows, the actual morning sun painted the city in gold, its light seeming to bless this gathering of healing hearts. But the real illumination came from within, from the strength of community, the power of shared stories, the endless capacity of love to transform darkness into dawn. Emma's voice rose above the gentle music that accompanied the play. And so the brave princess learned that morning light wasn't just about finding your way home. It was about becoming a light for others, showing them that hope is never lost, that love is never wasted, that every heart has the capacity to shine. As the young performers took their final bow, the cafe erupted in applause. Similar scenes were playing out in morning brew locations across the country, children telling their stories, families finding hope, communities coming together in the shared light of healing. Sarah looked around at what they had built, not just a cafe or a foundation, but a movement of transformation that continued to grow and evolve. Each person who found their way to morning light became a beacon for others, creating an endless chain of hope and healing. Emma rushed over to hug her parents, her face glowing with joy and purpose. "Did you see?" she asked excitedly. "Everyone was shining their own light."